Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto becomes emotionless part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. A boy who from an early age was cursed by a malevolent god who despised the boy's ancestors to no ends. The curse itself was by no means normal. It was not one of those simple curses that brings forth misfortune, illnesses, or immediate death, but rather it was worse. It was a curse that took away not the boy's luck, nor health, nor life, but rather it was an evil curse that took away the boy's purpose. The curse stripped the boy from the destined greatness set for him by his ancestors, and instead of all the prestige, glory, and success, a feeling of unending void forever lingered within the boy's existence. Thus from a young age the boy became broken, a distorted person who lacked a sense of purpose, lacked and sense of meaning in life. He was what many considered damaged goods, a distorted person who missed a few gears, a person unfit for society, a boy unfit for even his own family. Though they did try, mind you, try so hard to fix whatever it was that was wrong with the boy. They went to hospitals around the world, they consulted doctors of varying fields and professions, but nothing, not a single thing could explain what was wrong with the boy. This in turn caused his family, his clan, to push him away, to send him off to where they thought they could fix, and if medicine cannot cure the boy, then a miracle brought about by faith was their only choice. His family sent him to a family friend who was acquainted with the church, and it was there that the young distorted boy spent most of his early days. For days on end, the boy lived only for the sake of living. For days on end, the boy learned only for the sake of learning. For days on end, the boy fought only for the sake of fighting. For years the boy lived an empty and hollow life. That was until the day the boy met her. That beautiful girl. It was always the women that brought the best out of men, and despite his lack of purpose the boy was still of male persuasion. She changed him for the better or worse. Thus the boy and girl met. At first the boy did not get along with the girl, as she, unlike him, had a greater purpose in life. She was destined for greatness, destined to do good things with her life. While he was just a boy, a prodigious yet flawed boy who viewed the world in oranges and blues. Though despite their obvious differences the flawed boy still managed to become friends with the girl. A friendship that lasted day on end. A friendship that bore fruit to one of the most beautiful sight that the boy has ever seen. He saw a smile, a serene and happy smile full of warmth, happiness, and compassion. A simple smile that gave him a sense of unparalleled content and satisfaction that at that point in his life was completely alien to him. It was that kind and loving smile which brought a warm feeling to the boy's chest, momentarily filling up the great void that dwells within. It was at that moment when he, the boy who had no purpose, was finally able to find a purpose in his life. Though childish and immature, the boy devoted himself to the idea that making others smile and bringing them happiness was his calling. Thus he became a trickster, a mischievous boy who did his best to make the people around him smile. He did his best to make people smile even at the cost of his own pride and standing in the world. After all, why should he care about what others say? As long as they were happy, then he too was somewhat happy. But then with the knowledge of happiness the boy also came to know sadness, agony, grief, hopelessness, and despair. More often than not the cause of these emotions that assailed his friends were none other than beings that were said to not exist, the natural enemy of the church. Monsters and devils. With the idea of happiness and sadness lingering with his mind, the boy renewed his efforts to bring more joy and happiness to his friends, allies, and family from the church. To bring joy and happiness to others, and especially those close to him, even at the cost of his own life. It was an unhealthy and foolish obsession that the boy carried on, soon becoming his dream, ideal, purpose, salvation, and unknown to him, also his damnation. However, despite the boy's efforts as he grew up within the ranks of the church, the boy eventually found out that not everyone could be happy. Yes, as he matured he learned that everything in this world came at a cost. For one to win another must lose. For one to live another must die. For one to attain happiness another must drown in sadness. To his young and immature mind that simple idea translated that for his friends to continue to live happy and healthy lives then others must die. But as child he was taught that taking the life of others was a grave sin, so at first he was confused on how to act upon his developing oath. However, with the guidance of several figures in his life he was slowly pushed towards the path of a warrior, much like another girl he met long ago. Therefore, rather than devoting himself to make everyone around him happy, the boy opted to become a sword. A sword that cuts down unhappiness and brings forth joy. A sword drawn and wielded for the sake of his allies. To maintain the happiness of those around him he must continuously bring forth misfortune and grief to the lives of demons, devils, heretics, and monsters who bring nothing but sadness and suffering. With the blessing of the church, he could kill without having to commit the grave sins that he was sure will earn the hate of his friends. No, he knew that when they find out of his calling they will be happy, and they were. This brought a smile upon his face. The boy was willing fight for the sake of his friend and allies. The boy was willing live for the sake of his friend and allies. The boy will die for the sake of his friends and allies. Unknown to him, he took the path of a bloodied sword. That was the path he chose for the sake of keeping those around him happy. Yes, so long as they were happy. Then he too was happy. Such is the self-destructive path of a fool. Kyokai no Ken. I have pursued my enemies, and overtaken them, neither did I turn again till they were consumed. I shattered them, so that they were not able to rise. They fell under my feet. For thou hast girded me with strength to battle, thou hast subdued under me those that rose up against me. Thou hast also given me the necks of my enemies, that I might destroy them that hate me. They cried, but there was none to save them, even to the Lord, but he answered them not. Then I beat them small as the dust before the wind, I cast them out as the dirt in the streets. Psalm 18 verses 37 to 42. Kyokai no Ken. Chapter 1 Thy Faith. Play Naruto Shippuden Movie OST 14 Violent Fluctuation. The moon was shining ever so dimly as a battle no more of a slaughter raged on beneath the cloudless night sky. In the middle of a graveyard, several corpses were laying astrewn, sliced, smashed, battered, frozen, and destroyed. They were all that remained of the loyal vassals of a proud vampire who carried the name of Teeps. Ashen silver hair was waving about fiercely despite the lack of wind as the proud vampiric noble found himself fighting for his life against one of his kind's most natural enemies. No, it wasn't the likes of the Leakin of olds that the creature found himself against, but rather the simplest of all his foes. Humans. Fragile by nature, his enemy was supposed to cower down upon his wake begging for mercy, to which he was supposed to respond by killing his opponent with merciless brutality and utmost condescension. But that was not the case. For his enemy was far beyond what he expected. Clad in priestly white vestments, his true adversary appeared out of nowhere and forcefully stopped him from enjoying his nightly ventures of hunting down virgins to rape them to no ends, and suck out their bloods until they were nothing more but dry husks. In less than a minute after their appearance, his court of minor vampires and ghouls numbering hundreds were cut down to just him remaining, and by the way the battle was going on he was sure that he too would follow the footsteps of his allies. Him, a proud vampire of the great lineage of Teeps, losing against two mere mortals. Just the thought ignited the fiery inferno of rage and hate that he felt within him to no ends. Claws sharpening, canines lengthening, demonic wings flapping about along with black malicious aura cloaking his entire frame, the vampire roared out in endless rage as he charged at one of the two beings that dared to humiliate him, a bespectacled adolescent exorcist with spiky blonde hair and cerulean blue eyes, cold unnatural blue eyes. Like a matador to a bull, the vampire's target easily moved away from his raging charge. With footsteps barely audible and movements almost impossible to catch even by the sharpest of mortal eyes, 3 sabers of pure light appeared in between each of Teen's knuckles, totaling 6 blades of light upon each hand. The vampire's wings waved about, elevating him higher and higher into the night sky until he was far from the exorcist's reach. "You detestable human! Know your place!" the proud vampire shouted as he suddenly dive-bombed through the air, shooting himself towards the exorcist. "I know my place," the bespectacled exorcist whispered as his eyes followed upon the vampire's trajectory, carefully looking for a perfect timing to counterattack. Boom. A sonic boom passed by, nearly blowing the exorcist away as he barely evaded being plowed through by the speeding vampire. Boom. Another wave of wind shot against the exorcist's body as the teen was barely able to evade a swipe from the vampire. 3 small claw-like gashes appeared on the teen's vestments, drawing out blood, while the noble from the immortal house of Teeps continued his maddening assault. Slash. With his superior capabilities, the vampire landed another swipe with his prolonged claws, wounding the evading exorcist's shoulder. Smash. The vampire's fierce wings crashed against the exorcist's stomach, forcing the teen to lurch forward. Smash. A punch to the jaw launched the bespectacled teen high up in the air, enabling the Teeps to land a flurry of strikes that the exorcist barely managed to avoid and block with his holy swords, most of which broke under the strength of the vampire's assault. Crash. With a high-arching axe kick, the vampire sent the blue-eyed blonde crashing towards the ground, creating a small crater beneath the wake of the blow. "Ha ha! Having trouble keeping up, human?" boasted the airborne vampire as he was surrounded by a larger amount of dark miasma. The injured exorcist didn't bother to respond as he slowly stood up from the crater. His entire frame was marred with cuts and gashes that continued to bleed, along with the bruises that darkened with each passing second. Yet, for some reason, the bespectacled exorcist looked barely fazed by the assault. Yes, despite his grievous injuries that without a doubt have killed a normal man, the teen acted rather indifferently. It was as if the exorcist didn't care about all the damage his body received. In essence, that wasn't far from the truth. TCH. The vampire clicked his tongue in frustration as his opponent showed no signs of fear or even panic despite being injured. I bore of you and your existence. I guarantee that with this next blow you shall die. That is your future, you whelp. The creature of the night stated before he came flying down towards the exorcist, spinning downwards, creating the impression of dark crushing drill that will mow down all that was unfortunate enough to be caught by the attack. The bespectacled exorcist closed his crystal blue eyes. Ever since he was young, the exorcist's eyes were always noted to be superior than that of a normal human. His eyes allowed him to pick up and track fast-moving objects, along with enabling him to pick up on even the most subtle of details. With his eyes, he could even see the flow of the life energy of the world, allowing him a greater advantage in tracking down his enemies, along with avoiding life-threatening attacks from enemies whose speed far surpasses his own. Many hailed him for his eyes that he apparently inherited from his ancestor, but he cared little about it. To him, these eyes were just a tool, one needed for his endeavor of ending the lives of heathens. It was because of his powerful blue eyes that the blonde exorcist was able to observe the vampire's speed, power, attack patterns, endurance, from the slightest to the most exaggerated of movements. His eyes has seen it all. I can see a different future, the teen whispered as another set of swords appeared in his hands, 4 in each hand, totaling 8, which replaced the blades broken by the vampire of the House of Teeps. Without even needing to look, the exorcist knew that he had exactly 5 seconds before the vampire would reach and mostly likely kill him with the incoming attack. He could see it within the eye of his mind. Percentage-wise, he only had about a 5% chance of winning and defeating his adversary, who was clearly superior than he was, but the exorcist knew that as long that 1% exists, then he could still pull off a victory. With his eyes still closed, the teen started counting down to the inevitable. 5. He calmed his nerves. His breathing was shallow and steady in preparation for his next course of action. 4. His senses extended, taking into account not only the sound of his approaching demise, but also the stillness of the earth and the blowing of the wind. 3. His grip on his blades tightened, his mind worked into overdrive as he replayed his plan again and again, looking for possible flaws and fixing them if possible. 2. The exorcist's knees bent down as he channeled most of the energy in his body, called chakra, towards his limbs. The ground slowly cracked underneath his feet as he readied himself for the jump of his life. His plan was foolproof. All the variables has been taken into consideration. Your future is, he whispered as the countdown continued, dwindling inversely with the now fierce and deafening sound of the vampire's incoming attack. 1. Power exploded from his legs, propelling the exorcist up towards the sky as high as he could. Death, he whispered as he thought about the future that awaited both he and the vampire. If he were to fail, then he was going to die. If the was to succeed, then his opponent shall perish. It was now or never. Every movement from here on out must be precise and within the range of his calculations. To make a mistake was to die a horrendous death. There was no room for errors. He had one shot. 0. As if pulling the trigger of a proverbial gun, the teen's eyes shot open, revealing his cold blue eyes unto the world. He could feel the wind clashing against his body, proving just how high he jumped. Snapping his head down, he saw that a few dozen feet beneath him was none other than the spiraling mass of darkness, which was the silver-haired vampire. The man from the House of Teeps was currently grinding the ground where the exorcist stood mere moments ago. Just where the bespectacled exorcist wanted the heathen to be. In a span of a few seconds, the exorcist's arms flickered in a speed far surpassing the boundaries of humanity. At first, he threw all 8 of the holy swords towards the vampire. Then he threw another 8 that appeared from his sleeves. Then another 8, and then another, and then another. In a span of a few seconds, no less than 100 holy swords were raining down on the vampire. But it did not end there, for the very next words that came out from the exorcist's mouth proved to further push the vampire towards defeat. Haikashur no aim, reign of 100 deaths. With the uttering of a simple phrase, the 100 holy swords showering the vampire all glowed an ominous blue before they were ignited and engulfed by a dazzling wreath of azure blue flames that flickered ever so fiercely against the evening wind. Whoosh! The sound of several swords cutting through the air echoed ever so slowly as the swords allowed the laws of gravity to ensnare them, bringing them down to the earth where their target awaited. The best way to describe the attack was to call it a rain of sharp, fiery blue death, a testament to the exorcist's skill, a creation of a literal rain of flaming swords blessed by the power of light for the sole purpose of slaying the damned. It was stunning visual appeal to all that would witness the beauty of this attack. However, for the one who was at the receiving end of this blow, then the image of 100 burning blades would forever be engraved in their minds as the sight of the approaching inevitability of death. That much was certain for the spinning vampire who was the incoming fiery rain of death as the sign of his demise. Boom! A large cloud of smoke surrounded the ground as the flaming blades of light exploded upon the rough earth, bringing forth a maelstrom of fire and destruction. Silence permeated the area after the 100th or so blade fell from the ground, ending the reign of death. Not long after the end of the attack, the dust cleared, revealing unto the descending exorcist the several wounded form of the vampire. Gone were both of his wings along with the entirety of his left hand, sword was sticking out of his body, several burning holes marred the frame of his chest, legs, and feet, his entrails were hanging out of a large gash in his stomach. Blood was everywhere. That attack would have most certainly killed any lesser demons, but he was not the same. He was a proud vampire of the House of Teeps, a house whose weakest members were considered on par with high-class devils. He could not fall here, at least not fall without dignity. With an unearthly roar that shook the entire graveyard, the wounded vampire remained standing, ever vigilant despite being pelted by no less than 100 flaming holy swords. "You bastard!" shouted the vampire as his wounds failed to regenerate due to the holy presence within the swords that continued to poison his system. By then the vampire knew he was most likely going to die, but he was not planning to die alone. He was taking that human with him. The blue-eyed exorcist landed on the ground, 2 holy swords immediately appearing within the grasp of his hands, readying himself for the next stage of the battle. His initial assault was a stunning success. In his mind, the chances of victory grew from a mere 5% to a stunning 85%. Now all that was left is to incapacitate and slay his foe before the man could manage to escape. The vampire charged in with reckless abandon. Although injured, the vampire's speed surpassed that of a seasoned exorcist, but to his eyes, no, to him who has properly adjusted to the speed of the vampire's assault, easily avoid the thrust of the silver-haired vampire's hand spear. The tombstone and the next 20 or so behind the blonde, however, were not lucky, as they were destroyed by not only the initial thrusting attack but also by the sheer penetrative wind pressure that the attack produced. The 85% chance of winning in the exorcist's mind quickly dropped to 50%. He was not expecting the vampire to retain that much of his strength even after getting impaled by several holy swords which should have seeped his strength. At first he was planning to make it into a battle of attrition and just evade steadily until his opponent was no more, but those plans soon went out the window. This was no battle of attrition, it all boiled down to one simple winning objective: whoever lands their attack first wins. With newfound vigor gained from his approaching demise, the wounded vampire continued his maddening assault. Clang! The diamond-hard elongated nails turned to vicious claws of the vampire's remaining hand clashed against the divine blades within the exorcist's hands. With one swift motion, the vampire quickly pulled his claw back and threw a devastating kick that the bespectacled exorcist barely managed to block by crossing his 2 swords of light across his chest. Smash! The 2 blades shattered as the exorcist was launched through the air, the maddened vampire hot on his trail. With a flick of his wrists, a set of 4 holy swords appeared in his hands. Blue eyes never leaving his target, the exorcist threw all blades towards the vampire. Stab, 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 asterisk, stab, 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 asterisk, stab. Several gut-wrenching sounds of muscle getting torn apart and getting scraped echoed loudly as a multitude holy swords skewered the charging vampire. In all intents and purposes, the vampire was already dead, as all 8 of the holy swords crashed against his body, 4 of which embedding in his heart, while the other 4 was scattered along his abdomen. Normally this would have killed the vampire there and then, but this one was different. Not minding his wounds, the vampire brought his hand up before slashing it downwards in a fierce and devastating chop that slashed the blonde diagonally in the chest. The holy swords the blonde drew out and intertwined in order to block the blow shattered easily. The breaking of his blades was accompanied by the tearing of his skin and muscle, resulting in a squirt of red ichor that sprayed beneath the night sky. The creature of the night then twisted his body and landed a debilitating roundhouse kick that sent the exorcist crashing towards the ground. Smash! The vampire from the House of Teeps smirked as he licked the blood of his fingers' tips. It was not enough to fully heal him, but it was still good enough to stall his death for a few more seconds. With his wings already rendered useless, the ashen-haired vampire landed on the ground, his eyes never leaving the small crater that formed beneath the exorcist. Now stay dead. The Teeps roared out, glaring a hole towards the crater observing for any signs of further life. TCH, the man clicked his tongue. He wished the battle was over there and then so that he may pass on. However, much to the vampire's frustration, the exorcist still stood up. The exorcist was injured badly, his body bruised and battered. A large bleeding cut appeared upon his wounded chest, a trail of blood falling from the side of his mouth which was adorned by his busted lips. One of his blue eyes were closed, yet the exorcist seemed barely fazed even in the face of his life-threatening injuries. He was unnaturally calm even in the face of death. The chances of victory has dropped to a 10%, calmly whispered the bespectacled exorcist. Make that 5%. He added as he looked and found that his right arm was hanging limply by his side. He was not an expert in medicine, but by the looks of it several of his bones were probably broken. He sighed internally. I guess my teachers were right when they told me that vampires were not to be trifled with. I may have gotten too cocky, but I'll manage. With a flick of his still working hand, a single handle of a holy sword appeared from his sleeve. A blade of light appeared over the shoulder of the swords as he held the blade firmly in his hands. He turned his head towards his opponent, his chilling blue eyes meeting the vampire's crimson orbs for the first time during the entirety of their death match. Come, let's finish this battle, Vampire-san. You don't need to tell me, you mongrel. A dark miasma of demonic/vampiric energy surrounded the vampire noble's remaining hand, further sharpening his claw. I intend to kill you now. Sorry, don't plan on dying anytime soon, replied the blonde as his eyes concentrated on the vampire. With his eyes he believed that he could see everything. With his eyes he could see his victory. It was the sudden passing of the gentle wind amidst the now ruined graveyard that signaled the final clash between the vampire and exorcist. The two charged at one another. There were no fancy skills involved, no flashy magic tricks, it was just a full head-on charge between the combatants. As they approached each other, the vampire was first to act. Lashing out his claw, the ashen-haired noble aimed to decapitate the exorcist, slicing through the man's neck with but one clean thrust of his hand. That proved to be his downfall. Just as the death blow was about to land, the exorcist spun around the last moment, his head barely evading the killing blow as his body continued spinning towards the vampire's unprotected body. Shing! With a quick swing of his blade, the exorcist sliced through the vampire's remaining arm as if was paper. Shifting his grip on his sword, the exorcist aimed the saber of light's tip towards the vampire's head before thrusting it forward in hopes of killing the bloodsucker there and then. However, luck proved not to be on the exorcist's side as the vampire saw the attack coming and managed to bend his neck to the side, making the sword lose its target. In the hopes of retaliating, the vampire opened his mouth, his fangs elongating as he attempted to bite down on the exorcist's neck, only to find that the blue-eyed teen released his sword, ducked down, and rolled away from his bite. However, before he could bite the blonde, the vampire was beaten to the punch by the exorcist, who bit his right bicep in order to lift up the limping limb. The exorcist then took a quick step in getting through the vampire's defense so that both of his hands touched the ashen-haired man's body. His working hand landed on the man's chest while his limp hand landed over the man's already badly wounded abdominal area. Sayonara, the exorcist whispered as a small trail of blood dropped from his throat, showing that he only avoided the vampire's killing blow by a hair's breadth. Che was the vampire only reply. Stab, 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 asterisk, asterisk, stab, asterisk, stab, 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 asterisk, asterisk, stab, asterisk, stab, 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 asterisk, asterisk, stab, asterisk, stab, stab, stab. Asterisk stab stab asterisk asterisk stab asterisk asterisk stab asterisk asterisk stab asterisk asterisk stab asterisk. From the vampire's back erupted no less than several dozen holy swords wreathed in azure flames. More sounds of flesh being torn echoed about, only this time it was accompanied by the sound of sizzling and burning. There was no deathly scream of pain. The vampire just fell on his knees, several flaming swords burning through his organs and slowly poisoning him with their holy essence, while the blonde exorcist kept standing ever vigilantly despite the punishment his mortal body has received. The victor has been decided. Kyokai no Ken. The seriousness of the situation was soon broken upon the sight of a smiling blonde-haired teen with green eyes cheerfully eating a hot dog as he sat atop a tombstone several meters away from the now ruined graveyard that was filled with blazing holy swords, a torrent of blood, and a lot of corpses. Naruto, this is taking too long, the blonde complained in between his bites, calling on the other exorcist who just fought tooth and nail against the vampire noble. The exorcist, now known as Naruto, quickly responded, his voice showing no signs of either pain nor exhaustion. Don't worry, I'm about to finish this guy off. You pitiful human! Don't you dare look down on the house of Teeps. Know that even if you strike me down, hundreds of my kin shall continue to exist. Mark my words, one day the wrath of my family will fall upon you, foolish mortal, in full force. The wounded vampire roared out, his body already falling apart and turning to gray ash. So? Was the bespectacled exorcist's simple response before he sliced the creature's head off with yet another blade of light that he held in his still working hand, causing the vampire's body turn into ash, bringing forth the end to the man's life. May God have mercy of your soul, the teen whispered, making a quick sign of the cross before taking out a vial of holy water that he poured over the vampire's ashes to make sure it was dead. Better safe than sorry. Sizzle. A venomous scent of death mixed with blood and iron wafted the area as the vampire's body slowly burned while disintegrating to nothingness. As the vampire's body met its fate, the exorcist turned towards his fellow blonde, blue eyes gleaming through the darkness in an almost uncaring manner. How about that? We evoke the wrath of a whole vampire family upon the two of us. I don't really mind, but it will be a hassle to kill all of those things, was the lazy reply of the other exorcist. Really, Delio? I was under the impression that you can freeze all of their collective asses for shits and giggles, exclaimed Naruto as he started walking towards his partner, who voluntarily sat out the fight so that he can battle the vampire one-on-one. The possessor of the second strongest Longinus, the Zenith Tempest, also known as the strongest exorcist, Delio Jeswalso smiled at his friend's words. And I was under the impression that you'd slice all off them up without a care in the world, he quipped, referring to his fellow blonde's habit of solving most of his problems by cutting the up with his swords. Against a horde of hundreds, I know my limits. Although if I was born with a Longinus like you, the strongest exorcist, then it might be different. Naruto chuckled as he leaned on a nearby tombstone. Oh? Why would you say that? I was under the impression that you could cut down hundreds with a wave of your true holy sword, O great descendant of the second sage. Naruto smirked touche. He paused for a moment, as a cool breeze clashed against his frame. What a chilly night it was. So when is the cleanup crew arriving? He asked his longtime friend. Since I already called them while you were having the fight of your life, then I say they'll be here by dawn. Good, the bespectacled exorcist nodded. I really don't want to deal with the populace panicking upon the sight of burning swords and large chunks of ice in their graveyard. Don't forget about the corpses. True. Delio chuckled. By the way, about truly holy sword, how come you didn't use it? Asked Delio while pointing at the sheathed sword strapped behind Naruto's waist. I don't always want to rely on it, he replied as his eyes glanced upon the sword on his waist. In his childhood he thought of it as nothing more but a family heirloom, but much to his surprise it was apparently a holy sword who chose him as its wielder. But you could have made this battle so much easier, declared Delio. Were you not happy that I defeated the vampire? Naruto asked in response. The strongest exorcist rubbed the back of his head. Well, I'm actually happy that you defeated him. I won and you're happy, that's all that Naruto replied rather quickly, only to cut himself off as his ears picked up on something. It was the sound of flapping wings caught not only his but also Delio's attention, effectively stopping their conversation. Turning both of their heads to the direction of the noise, the two exorcists found what looked like a pigeon flying through the night sky. A carrier pigeon? Mumbled Delio, his eyes lingering on a small piece of paper attached on the bird's legs. Naruto extended his left hand towards the bird, prompting it to land on his extended limb. Does no one in the church know how to use a phone? The bespectacled teen complained as he quickly untied the small piece of paper tied on the bird's feet. I know how to use it, Delio said proudly as he reached for his pockets and pulled out a brand new cell phone complete with touchscreen and all. You don't count, since I've taught you how to use one ever since we were partnered up. The strongest exorcist pouted as he placed his phone back into his pockets. Be or no fun. Naruto suddenly went silent, his blue eyes gazing intently upon the message held within the simple piece of parchment. Is it another mission? Delio couldn't help but ask as he watched his partner remain silent for a few minutes, most likely reading through the contents of the message multiple times. The bespectacled blonde exorcist merely nodded in response to his friend as he pulled out what looked like a small crimson-colored cross from the piece of parchment before said parchment was suddenly engulfed in blue flames. So where are you going, Naruto-san? Orders to go back to headquarters first for debriefing, but the message says to prepare myself for a mission to Japan under the orders of one of the seraphs. Delio whistled in an impressed manner. Orders from the top, huh? Those are rare these days. This means something is amiss and must be dealt with swiftly. Delio nodded while his head processed the implications of his partner going away for another mission. A light bulb quickly appeared on top of his head. Oh, you said you were going to Japan, right? Naruto nodded in response. Yeah, back to my birth country. I haven't been in Japan in a while. Actually, the last time I was there was when the two of us killed those 3 Kishin. I still remember that I was about to deliver the last blow, and you stole the kill from me. Mama, you were taking too much time. No, you were just too lazy. I already killed one of them and was about to kill my second one, but you just suddenly decided to freeze everything into oblivion. I took time to carefully analyze their attack patterns before dishing out divine whoop as you just got impatient like always, you lazy but. Whatever. Dulio rolled his eyes before a light bulb suddenly flashed on top of his head. Nay Naruto, can you bring something back for me? If you promise not to freeze our next enemies to death, then I'll bring you some mochi, he replied, tone flat as ever. Deal. Naruto nodded, a small smile marring his face as he pushed himself off the tombstone. I'll see you around then. Yeah, see you next time. Naruto, stay safe and bring back some mochi. Hi, replied the bespectacled exorcist as he started walking away from the boundaries of the graveyard. Oh, and Naruto. The exorcist stopped his trek and turned towards his fellow blonde. Yeah? Shouldn't you go to the hospital first? Dulio pointed out. Naruto raised one eyebrow while looking down on his body. White clothes now tainted red, right arm hanging limp, several severe bruises and cuts, a few broken ribs. He was also bleeding rather badly from all the wounds he received from his battle against the vampire. You're right, I didn't notice that, he whispered, his tone rather flat but also showing a bit of surprise as if just noticing that injuries on his person. It appears that I'm losing too much BLO. Before he could even complete the string of words coming from his mouth, the blonde suddenly collapsed face first towards the ground unconscious. Oh shit! Naruto! Kyokai no Ken. A week later. The sound of bells ringing out in a harmonic manner proclaiming the coming of the noon could be heard every so often from within one of the many churches within the Vatican. It was a small and humble church, a construct made of wood and bricks built upon the blood and sweat of the many lives that served as a foundation for this specific church. This church was one that did not stand out like other churches in the vicinity, primarily because it is located near the edge of the state, far beyond the reach of the masses, although the various runes, sigils, and mystical arrays carved within the church's pristine white walls that covered the entire building in a form of barrier of invincibility did also help to pry away the eyes of the populace. Within the halls of this lone and mystical church, 2 priests stood in front of a wooden door. Just 2 old men clad in priestly robes and wielding blades of life. They were but a few of many who have lived their lives protecting and guarding this most holy of parishes. In simpler terms, the 2 were nothing but guards for the door which lead to the room where the boss often resided. Have you heard? One of the 2 priests, a man with graying features, asked, trying to break the ice in order to alleviate himself from the hellish punishment known as boredom. The other priest, one with white hair symbolizing that he was older of the 2, mumbled rather lazily. You know the sword of the church, right? The second guard priest nodded. Yeah, who doesn't know about him? Sword of the church is apparently a descendant of him, excitedly said the younger of the 2. The older priest's eyebrows furrowed. He was familiar of who the sword of the church was, who wasn't? Everyone who lived in the darker side of the church knew of the man and his feat, and but who was the him his younger friend was referring to? Him? The man who defeated a demonic god and saved the world. You know, the sage from the old tales of the Rakuto, proudly exclaimed the graying priest. The older priest's eyes widened in surprise. A descendant of the 6 paths? Which one, the first or the second? He asked, almost rapidly, well aware of the old legend regarding the great savior who slayed a god and transcended humanity. The second. Oh. The future definitely looks brightly for the church. The older of the 2 roared out in laughter. This was pure gold for an old-timer like him. Let's just hope he doesn't quit from the church like that other descendants, those holy sword users. Such a waste. The younger priest snorted. If you're talking about that brat who descended from a dragon slayer? Bah, foolish boy, quit our order and has vanished from the face of the earth. The same goes for the strongest holy sword user, he just suddenly vanished. Yes, but let's not go off topic. Since I can see you are privy with some of this information, can you tell me how the church managed to get our hands on such a gem? From what I heard, the clan of his descendant were rather detached from society. He was exiled, was the answer of the younger priest. Exiled? Yes, at the tender age of 4 the boy was exiled and sent to the care of the Holy Church, where he was looked after by an executor who later recommended the boy for immediate training after finding out that the boy was not only talented but was also chosen by a holy sword. Yes, I have heard some rumors about him wielding a holy sword, but by God, a natural-born holy sword wielder? I never would have thought that I'd live to see the day of not one but two being chosen by the sacred blades. The younger priest smiled as he nodded happily. Yes, I heard that Griselda Quatra trained him along with the Durandal girl and that prodigy who inherited the Longinus. Rumors say that even the whore from those heretical inquisitors, and the great paladin of the betrayer had a hand in training him. Of course those are all rumors. Rumors, huh? At this point they might as well be considered as truths. After all, you've probably heard the story of the boy's skill with the blade. That just had Alexander and Co written all over it. And did you say Longinus brat? The older priest scowled as he recalled his experience with Delio. Ugh, that insufferable brat, he lets his stomach and palate think for him rather than using that brain of his, shook his head, steering his thoughts away from the one entitled as the strongest exorcist. Tell me, who was this executor who discovered the swords when he was a child? I must give him my utmost of thanks for his discovery. That child, what was his name? He was the son of the supervisor of that one heretical ritual those mages fight tooth and nail for. Last I heard of him was that he was killed in combat against one of those heretics. Apparently he was an acquaintance of the boy's family. We were lucky tot he sent the boy here before he was killed in line of his service, replied the younger of the two. I know of the lad, such a poor soul to die so early. I shall pray his soul. He nodded, allowing himself a short moment of silence in respect for the deceased. So tell me, have you seen what the sword of the church looks like? I've only heard about his features from rumors and have never really met him in person. They say he is of average height, skin slightly tanned, has spiky blonde hair, cerulean blue eyes. He is always wearing a pair of indestructible glasses, he wears a necklace made of magatama beads, and finally they say he always keeps his holy sword strapped in the lower part of his back most of the time. That is a rather detailed description. The younger priest chuckled. Well, I'm actually part of his fan club. I can't help but to admire someone who delivers judgment upon the damned. Amen to that, my fellow priest. Amen. The younger priest cheered out as the two of them descended into a fit of laughter. As the two laughed, they failed to realize a 16-year-old, blonde-haired young man wearing glasses walking towards them. He was clad in priestly white robes and white bandages that wrapped around what was most likely several wounds in his body. The blonde eventually stopped a few steps in between the two guards, who were still gossiping and ignoring his existence. The teen sighed as he pushed up his glasses with the palm of his left hand. Excuse me? He said no, almost screamed to get the attention of the two elderly priests. What do you want? The younger priest asked as he glared at the newcomer who interrupted him of his fanboying ways. I'm here for an appointment today. The older priest raised an eyebrow. He knew that the boss had an appointment scheduled for the day, but was it really with this flimsy-looking young lad? Can I see any proof? He asked. The bespectacled blonde simply reached for his pocket and pulled out what looked like a small crimson-colored cross before handing it towards the older priest. Here, lazily said the teen. You may go in. The older priest said after inspecting the cross, not that he did much inspecting since he knew at first sight that it was the legitimate seal that the boss often used. Thank you, whispered the bespectacled teen as he resumed walking towards the doors which the two priests protected. You look familiar, do I know you? Asked the younger priest just as the blue-eyed blonde passed him. No, I don't think we've ever met, Naruto replied as he pushed open the wooden door and soon disappeared on the other side, leaving the two guards/priests to their gossiping. Kyokai no Ken. Naruto walked inside the room. A slight smile tugged the side of his lips. It hasn't changed much since he first entered through those very doors when he was 5 or 6 years old. It was still as plain as ever, barely furnished with just a few wooden bookcases, a small fireplace, a desk, and several chairs within. Overall, it was a really dull room. Shifting his gaze, the exorcist's eyes landed on a man sitting on a chair behind the simple wooden desk. He was the very same man who welcomed him to this institution years ago, and it looked as if he hasn't aged a day. He was an old man of Middle Eastern descent with short, swept-back silver hair that matched his equally silver yet extremely powerful eyes. He would pass off as a kind old man if not for the single scar that ran down his left eye and the fact that despite being somewhere in his 70s, the man retained a rather large and muscular frame that dwarfed Naruto. He swore that for a moment in time he actually thought that the man was secretly a giant, or at least part bear to be huge like that. Hello, Naruto, the man greeted with a rather gentle tone. Naruto slightly bowed his head and returned the greeting to his current superior officer, the current leader of the faction of the church where he belonged. Hello, Master Geralt. The old yet muscular man raised an eyebrow upon seeing the bandages on the bespectacled teen's body. You look a little banged up. Got pummeled and almost killed by a vampire, no big deal. And where is Delio? I was under the assumption that I asked the both of you to report back here. He suddenly got some info about a rare type of curry appearing in India. Naruto rubbed the back of his head and looked rather sheepishly. He bailed on me at the airport. Instead of the flight going back here, he rode the one going to India, and truth be told, I thought I saw my sensei going on board the same flight. The older man let out a sagely chuckle as he cradles his hands on his desk. I see, I'll deal with Delio later. Your sensei, however, well, she's out of my jurisdiction, so I can't do anything about that. The silver-haired man brought out what looked like an old typewriter, which elicited a small sweat drop from Naruto. Boss. Yeah? Where's the new PC that I brought you a few months ago? It was broken, so I gave it away. You couldn't figure out how to use it, didn't you? Seriously, what is up with all the members of the church being technologically inept? It's because we value the old way of life, Naruto. Now that aside, would you be so kind enough to give me a report about your recent mission? The older man placed his huge digits on top of the typewriter. Naruto didn't even know how the huge man could push those small buttons with his freakishly huge fingers. Naruto. Huh? You spaced out on me. Sorry about that. The bandaged exorcist straightened his body in order to look more presentable and professional. Mission classification rank S, slaying of a noble vampire for the Teep's house was completed with difficulty. After arrival in the scene, Dulio and I gathered information until we found that the vampire used a graveyard near the town as a base of operations. Immediately getting the information, the two of us attacked their hideout. The battle itself involved both me and Dulio fighting a total body count of 157 ghouls and minor vampires, as well as fighting a noble from the House of Teeps. With his clearance, Dulio allowed me to battle the vampire on my own, and after a battle to the death I ended up as the winner. Then shortly after that I received your message, then passed out because of my injuries. That is all. Only the sounds of the typewriter could be heard in the room. I see, the older man whispered as he typed up the details of the mission. Naruto internally yawned. He always hated this part since it was boring, really boring. Turning his head from side to side, the blonde exorcist tried to find something to entertain himself with for the next few minutes or so, since his boss was a slow typer. Eventually Naruto's eyebrows rose as his cold blue eyes gazed upon the words written atop the folder. The Nation Benefice. Upon realizing the meaning behind those two simple words, a cold shiver ran in the blonde's back. It couldn't be. He thought as several memories flashed through his mind. For a moment he could see the face of a kind and pure girl just as the sounds of typing finally ceased, bringing him back to reality. Now it's time for your next mission. Hi. You remember the holy maiden that fell from grace? Yes, I was the one who was tasked to guard her during her time in Italy. Naruto quickly replied to his superior. And how did that turn out? The mission was deemed as a failure. The holy maiden healed the devil and was thereby excommunicated and banished from the church. He answered. The memory of not only his failure but the time he spent with such an innocent and cute girl were still clear in his mind. Good, you seem to remember your past mistakes. I want you to know we were lenient towards you because that was your first and only failure on an otherwise spotless record. The older man grabbed the folder. These orders comes from the top, with clearance from one of the great seraphs. He threw the folder at the blonde, who caught it with ease. Naruto opened the folder and started reading its contents. He remained mostly impassive, and his features were not betraying whatever impression he had about this mission. Would you do it? Will you carry out the will of our Lord? Asked the silver-haired man, his eyes stuck upon Naruto as if they were peering at his very existence. The bespectacled exorcist closed the folder and placed it right above his superior's desk. So? Naruto knelt on one knee, his head facing towards the floor. I am the sword of God who brings judgment upon the world. Humanity's weapon against the damned. You need only to point me to the right direction and I will bring forth divine retribution. The teen replied quickly in an almost mechanical manner. The older silver-haired man smiled. Good, go forth and may God be with you on this journey. Amen. Naruto replied as he quickly got up and made his way towards the door while hiding the fact that he was clenching his fists to the point that they were almost drawing blood. His mission was relatively simple, an easy one at that. He just needed to kill one person, a heretic exiled from the church. A person that he knew oh so well, the very same person who gave him a purpose in life. The girl with a kind and gentle smile. He should have known after seeing the words Vi Nation Benefice. He was being sent to a witch hunt. He had to kill Asia Argento. Play Gintama OST, Mukashi no Yujin Jie Kawarazu. The sky was tinted in orange, signifying the sun starting its descent into the night. By that time it was late in the afternoon or early evening. The various patrons and workers of the church wherein the garden was located were already leaving, for the day. Some went back to their homes in order to go back to their families that awaited for them, others went on to the city to seek enjoyment for the coming night, while the others simply walked away not really knowing where they were heading for in the dark future. Yet, despite the late hours of the afternoon turning to the early evening, a small child around the age of 6 or 7, and maybe 8, stood in front of a beautiful garden. Despite that fact that the church was quickly being vacated, that there was no longer anyone barring him, the boy, he still stayed behind. After all, he and a few others lived in the church, which somewhat acted as an orphanage. Thus, despite the passing of time, the boy's blue eyes was firmly placed upon the beautiful blue flowers that were growing from the various bushes and foliage. He was staring at them intently, not really knowing the reason why he was doing such an action. He just stared at the flowers, which just looked so unnatural yet somehow mystifying, and in his young mind even beautiful. There was just some form of beauty in the blue flowers' unnaturalness. "What ya doing?" A soft and childish voice reached his ears, prompting him to stop his ministrations for but a moment, and instead focus his attention towards the speaker. Turning his head to the side, he saw a familiar-looking blonde-haired girl who was wearing a dark blue nun's habit and a small silver cross around her neck. He immediately recognized her as Asia Argento, a girl that he became acquainted with a few months back. "I was just looking at the flowers," he said as he had slowly turned back towards the garden filled with beautiful blue flowers. "Why?" she asked while carefully walking towards his side until they were a foot apart. "I don't know, I just found myself staring at them for no reason," Naruto replied, his voice rather flat and passive, bordering that of emotionless. She tilted her head to the side, confusion evident in her features. "I thought you were watching them cause you like them since they're really pretty." "I don't dislike them," Naruto started, his eyes still gazing upon the blue flowers which were now waving about due to the passing a gentle breeze. "But I don't like them either. You could say I'm just watching the flowers for the sake of watching them, and nothing else." "So you don't like watching the flowers?" Asia asked. "I don't dislike it," he replied rather quickly. The girl in the nun habit found herself asking another question. "Then you like it?" "I don't not dislike it." "So you don't like the flowers, but you also don't not dislike it." She placed her head on her temples, her fingers interlocking with her smooth, golden blonde locks. "You're confusing me, Naruto. Do you like these flowers or not?" "Roses." She blinked in surprise, not expecting that response from her fellow blonde. "Huh." "Those flowers," he pointed at the blue flowers that the girl was most likely referring to. "They're called roses." "But aren't roses supposed to be red, not blue?" "I don't know why they're blue." The boy stared at the blue roses, his mind processing the information that blue roses weren't natural. "But what I do know is that Master Garo planted them. He told me they were roses, and since Master said that they were roses, then they must be roses." "Then why are they blue?" "Perhaps they got tired of being red, so they turned blue?" he replied, not really knowing the reason behind the rose's color. "Perhaps it was the result of some chemicals or even magic." "Is that possible?" "We see it with our eyes at this very moment. We're both looking at it, and we both see blue flowers." He reached towards the roses with both hands and grabbed one of the roses by its stem, not really caring about the thorns that pierced his small hands. With one fierce tug, he plucked the flower from the bush. "I'm holding it in my hands now," he said as he showed his fellow blonde the flower. "Then it exists. Blue roses are within the realm of reality." "Naruto, you're bleeding again," the girl shouted in shock at the sight of blood that now flowed from his hands. "Oh," he muttered in surprise, or at least to him it was surprise, as to others he would have sounded flat and apathetic. "I didn't notice." "Well, you need to take better care of yourself." The nun grabbed his bleeding hands and enveloped it with her own as a mystical green hue covered her hands. Upon contact with his hands, the cuts and gashes started healing. "I won't always be here to patch you up when you hurt yourself," the girl said innocently as she stared at the boy's hand. "I'll keep that in mind." "You said that the last time." "Did I?" "Uh-huh. I forgot." Well, you better remember this time," Asia said as the green glow on her hand subsided, signaling the full healing of his injured hands. "I'll try," he replied as he flexed his now healed hands. He didn't really understand why did she care so much about him getting injured. There was no big deal when he bled during training. It was just cuts and bruises that eventually held with time. He then noticed that the girl was no longer paying attention to him, instead she was looking down on the ground. Raising an eyebrow in confusion, the boy decided to follow the girl's line of sight, his gaze eventually landing on the very same object that garnered the girl's attention. There on the ground was the blue rose that he plucked earlier. The beautiful and majestic blue rose was on the ground covered with blood, his blood. It looked wonderful. He didn't even notice that he actually let go of the flower. For all he knew, he still had it within his hands, but apparently somewhere between her grabbing his hands and healing them, he released his hold upon the flower. Without even thinking, he bent down and picked up the flower, this time being careful not to wound his hands in the process. "Would you like it?" She muttered some words under her breath that he didn't catch before she nodded. Placing his hand upon the flower's thorn stem, he carefully plucked the stem until there was only a small thornless part of it left. He then turned to Asia, who was waiting excitedly. The boy took several steps towards her, his hands holding the now stemless blue rose whose petals were slightly tinted red with his own blood dash. Leaning towards Asia, the boy placed the flower on the left part of her hair, between her bangs near her ear. "Here," he whispered as he looked at both her and the flower. "It suits you," the boy said in all honesty. A tint of red appeared on the girl's cheeks as her hands went on the rose placed on her hair. She then smiled, that smile, very same smile which she sent her a few days ago, the one that brought a weird feeling to his chest. "Thank you?" What was it again? What did people feel when they smiled? What emotion was it that the girl in front of him was showing? Oh yeah, one of his teachers, Master Gerald, mentioned something about that emotion. It was called happiness, if he remembered it. "You're happy, right?" he mumbled after a few seconds of deep thought, wanting to confirm the conclusion he reached. "Of course I'm happy," the girl replied without any hesitation. "I'm especially when I'm with you, since we're friends after all," she added before her eyes widened. The girl placed her hand in her mouth as if she regretted the words she just uttered. It was as if she wasn't sure if they were really friends. Was she afraid that they were friends? But were they even friends? He didn't recall her inviting him to become friends. Was that it? Did she want to be friends with him? "Do you want to be friends?" "Yes," Asia almost shouted. Her eyes were wide and filled with hope and the emotion that was called happiness. "I've never really had friends, so I was really hoping we could be friends. I was going to ask, but you beat me to it," the girl admitted. "Friends, how does being friends with you make you happy?" "Yep," she chirped happily. The boy closed his eyes as his mind went through hundreds of thoughts in a span of a few seconds. After a few seconds of silence in his part, the boy opened his eyes, his blue orbs meeting the nun's innocent green-colored eyes. "Then, as long as you're happy, I'm happy as well." Kyokai no Ken. A pair of blue eyes opened slowly, revealing unto the owner a flash of bright light that forced him to momentarily close his eyes and blink several times. "Ugh, hi, stupid sunlight," Naruto groaned out as he placed his hands upon his eyes and gently rubbed them in order to lessen the devious effects of the rays of the gaseous entity known as the sun, which was seen through the cloudless blue of the sky. He let out a small yawn as he felt the need to stretch out his body, but doing so he might disturb the passengers sitting beside him on the train he was on. He went with the alternative of simply stretching his arms over his head as to not hit his fellow passengers. "Good morning, Shinpo-san, Mr. Priest, I hope you have had a nice nap." With a stifled yawn, Naruto turned his attention towards the man sitting beside him, a man around his 20s with brown hair wearing a casual business suit. "It was a good sleep. I even had a nice dream," Naruto replied, as he recalled the dream he had about his younger days with Asia. "Oh, from the sound of it you probably enjoyed your dream, isn't that right, Shinpo-san?" "It was SOSO. You could say that I liked the dream yet hated it at the same time," the bespectacled priest replied honestly as he contemplated the fact whether the dream could be considered a happy dream or a nightmare. In one hand it was a precious memory to him, yet on another it was a dream that reminded him of his mission to kill the very same person with him in that dream. That sounds rather. The working man paused as he tried to think of a proper word to use since he didn't want to offend the nice priest in any ways. "Complicated. You could say that," Naruto said, promptly ending the conversation as his eyes went from the gentleman sitting beside him towards the transparent window to his side. Cerulean blue orbs gazed upon the urbanized buildings underneath the early morning sun that the train passed. If the information that he gathered from various sources and representatives from the churches in Japan was right, then at one of the stops along this rail line will lead him to the city where his old friend now resided, or at least where she was last spotted. "I'm Shinpo-san," said the brown-haired man. What is it?" Naruto casually asked as he returned his attention to the man sitting beside him. "I apologize for disturbing you, but I was just wondering if I can ask a favor." "It depends on what it is." The brown-haired man chuckled as he scratched the back of his head. "You see, I'm getting married soon, and I was just wondering if you could give me your blessings." 'Cause you know I heard that marriages last longer when the couples receive blessings from the church even before their marriage ceremony. Naruto sighed before he delivered the bad news to the excited man. I'm sorry, sir, but I'm not the type of priest that gives out blessings to those who are about to get married. Then what kind of priest are you, Shinpa-san? The brown-haired man asked, an eyebrow raised. His curiosity piqued as he thought that priests normally did a myriad of services, not just specific ones. The one who give people the last rites before they die, as well as the one present for funerals and burials, Naruto said, effectively ending the conversation between him and the young man, who by now had a rather sheepish expression on him, as if realizing his mistake. Just as he ended, the speakers of the train suddenly came to life. Attention passengers, we apologize for any inconveniences. We are now arriving at KUH station. KUH station. KUH station. Upon hearing the announcement, Naruto found himself standing up just as the train stopped. I apologize for not being able to help, mister, but I do hope you and your wife can live a happy life in the future. He sent the man an apologetic bow as he walked past him and went towards the exit. It was no problem. Thank you for your time, Shinpa-san. The man sent a happy smile at Naruto, to which the bespectacled teen responded by giving another nod towards the man as he exited the train. The exorcist, still garbed in his usual white priestly vestment, reached for his pockets as he walked towards the station's exit. Without a care in the world, the blonde took a phone, one of those new Android phones, out of his pocket. The bespectacled youth then quickly pressed several buttons, opening up various search engines and typing up several keys before proceeding with the search. In a matter of seconds, he was given the location of 2 churches within the city. The first one was abandoned and about to be demolished in the near future, while the other was still somewhat new, one of which was set up just a few years back. It was the very same institution where the current representative of the church in this town dwell upon. Nodding his head in satisfaction, the exorcist closed all the search engines along with his phone before depositing it within the recess of his pocket. Naruto yawned one last time as he finally exited the train station amidst a sea of people also heading out of the station. Time to get some intel, he said as he blended in with his surroundings. It took Naruto less than 30 minutes to reach his destination, a simple and quaint-looking church located near the train station around the outskirts of the city of Kuo. By the time of his arrival, it was still early in the morning, and as he expected, there were little to no parishioners within the church. Actually, as he pushed the wooden door leading into the church, he was welcomed to the sight of no one in the little church aside from a nun who was kneeling in front of an altar where a depiction of the Son of God nailed to a cross was held up high in all its glory. As if noticing his sudden intrusion, the nun stopped her prayer and rose from the ground. The nun was around his age. She has light gray hair bordering silver and dazzling full eyes. She was wearing a dark blue nun's habit, the usual church robes, along with a hat. Around her neck hung a red cloth, one which looked rather plain to the normal eyes, but to those savvy in the mystical arts they would see that the cloth itself was some sort of sacred object. A holy shroud. Naruto Uzumaki-san, I presume, the nun said softly. Indeed. Naruto nodded his head in confirmation as he took several steps towards the nun, passing several benches that lines the church until he was halfway between the nun and the altar. And I'm guessing you're the church's representative in this area as well as the informant that I seek. It is as you say, Naruto-san. My name is Karen Hortensia and I am the temporary representative of Kuo. Naruto tilted his head to the side in confusion. Temporary representative? I'm currently filling in for this church until a proper representative can be found. I am supposed to be stationed in Fuyuki, which is a few districts back, but the church found the need to station me here for the moment due to special circumstances. Karen answered politely. I see. Naruto nodded. I will not ask what the circumstances entails as I value a person's privacy, but I'd prefer if you can tell me what I need to know. Ask and thou shalt receive an answer, the girl replied as she folded her hands together and rested them around her abdomen. Are you fully aware of the happenings in the city? Naruto asked, purposely stressing with the word fully to see if the nun was privy with certain information. Of course I am aware of the happenings of this city, be it the normal daily occurrences of men or the dastardly events of the world which you and I belong to. For example, just a few days back a stray devil plagued the lands, killing a few humans until the heathen itself was slayed by a devil, specifically the peerage of one of the 2 devil representatives of this land. The gray-haired nun answered, her golden-colored eyes showing no hints of any lies. Do they belong to the 72 pillars? Naruto found himself asking. The temporary representative of the church answered rather reluctantly. The Gremri and Citri. Naruto found his eyes slightly widening in surprise. Those were 2 famous names among the 72 pillars. The former family of 2 of the 4 Satans. Indeed, So if your mission has anything to do with regards to them, then I suggest you abandon it, since it would be nothing more than suicidal. Yes, you might defeat them, but an angry Mao will not bode well for the current balance between the three factions. Then we're lucky that I have no plans to even touch a hair of their family. Rather, my target is someone who everyone in the church should be familiar with," he clarified, not really wanting the girl to think that he was some sort of renegade exorcist who was out to start a war between the three factions. It was the nun's turn to ask a question. "And who is your target?" "Asia Argento," Naruto replied, not bothering to hide who his target was. After all, he needed Karen to confirm Asia's location. The fallen maiden. The nun looked down on the ground in sadness, no doubt familiar with the story of the holy maiden who fell from grace. "Such a pity, may God have mercy on her soul." The nun made the sign of the cross, bowing her head down slightly as she sent a silent prayer to the biblical God. "Amen." Naruto remained silent for a moment, allowing the nun to pray before asking his next question. "Do you know her whereabout, or at least can you confirm if she really is in this town, much like my informants have told me?" "Your information is rather accurate. She has been spotted in this town recently. Asia Argento is most likely with the group of heretical exorcists and fallen angels that came to the city about a week ago." "Fallen angels in the middle of devil territory?" Karen nodded slowly. "I was lucky enough that they haven't attacked this church. The old church further within the city, however, wasn't so luck, as it was made into a pseudo-base of operations for the angels." "And where did you get this information from?" "My familiars. They are able to scout through the city undetected." "I see," Naruto muttered. Her explanation was sound, as he knew full well that there were certain types of familiars that were adept for spying purposes. "Do you know where Asia is normally seen?" The nun placed her hand upon her chin as she adopted a thoughtful expression. "She's mostly seen in the parks around the city, and aside from that, the girl also frequents the shopping district." "Thank you for your help." Naruto slightly bowed his head in appreciation before he turned around, his back now facing the nun. "Oh, you're going to soon?" "Yes, I have a mission to carry out." "Very well." The woman closed her eyes as she grasped the rosary placed upon her neck. "Then may God guide you along your mission. May He give you the courage to face all adversity, the strength to vanquish your foes, and the wisdom needed to make the right decision. Amen." "Amen," Naruto mechanically replied as he exited the church, leaving behind the silver-haired nun. For some reason the girl just seemed so familiar, though he couldn't put his finger in it. Internally shrugging, the exorcist left the church and started walking towards the city. Kyokai no Ken. For most of his life, Issei Haida has been what one would call a pathetic, perverted human being with no future ahead of him. However, a few weeks ago his life drastically changed. Through a series of unfortunate events, the brown-haired second-year student of Ko Academy found himself getting killed during his first date by his girlfriend, who turned out to be a fallen angel, and based on what she wore, a fallen angel that has a fetish for bondage, or S&M. It was the worst first date ever. It would also probably be considered his worst and last day in this world if not for the fact that his crimson-haired senpai Rias Gremory revived him from his deathbed and turned him into a low-class devil. Yes, the perverted entity known as Issei Haida was no longer human. Reborn Issei was now, in his own words, a pathetic devil with zero talent and slightly better, albeit more chaotic, future ahead of him. Truth be told, not much has changed in Issei's life aside from his discovering that he had awesome superpowers that he could use to make a copy of the Kamehameha attack, sudden life and death encounters with insane priests, tit-flashing monstrosities, and whatever the hell Miltan is. Miltan, that name still scares the hell out of him. He swore whatever the hell that thing was, it wasn't human. It was a devil, maybe worse. Though his days as a devil were not really in his mind, for today he was lucky enough to find himself in a date with Asia Argento, an innocent blonde nun who he had the pleasure of meeting several times for the past few days. Normally he would be in perverted mode, but the sheer innocence that the beautiful nun showed brought out the protective instincts from within him that he never knew he had. It really was a shame that Asia was apparently allied with that insane exorcist that not only slaughtered his clients, but also almost killed him. But alas, despite that fact, he was still able to reunite with the girl and was even able to have the pleasure of taking her out on a date. Unfortunately, the date was cut short when Yuma, or Rainair, as she called herself now, suddenly appeared out of nowhere and abducted Asia. Damn S&M fetishist, fallen angel of an ex-girlfriend. If it weren't for her boobs or the fact that she was stronger than him, then he would have punched her in the face when she abducted Asia. Now, being the kind and determined person that he was, Issei immediately planned to rescue the nun. Though much to his ire, his beautiful and buxom King Rias Gremory told him to forsake the girl to her fate. Obviously, he opposed this idea and reacted rather harshly after being admonished by Rias by rushing towards the abandoned church where Asia was held with reckless abandon. Fortunately for him, the blonde pretty boy swordsman Yudo Kiba and the cute but powerful rook Kanoko Toju decided to come along and help him in his quest to save the girl from the clutches of her evil captors. However, before they could even attack the church, the trio decided to wait for nightfall before attacking the enemy's stronghold for the sake of planning out their assault. In another world, their plan would have gone off without a hitch, but alas, fate had something different in store for all of them. For unknown to the young devil, during the entirety of his date, as well as the abduction of Asia, a pair of cold blue eyes watched from afar. A pair of cold blue eyes that belonged to a young man who Issei would soon come to know as his enemy. A pair of cold blue eyes that belonged to one Naruto Uzumaki. Kyokai no Ken. Before Issei and Ko attacks the church, the sun has set and the moon has risen, darkness returned and embraced the sky. The city itself, along its populace, was now asleep, ignorant of the events that go on in the dark hours of the night. Standing in front of an abandoned church which contained not only Asia Argento but also a few fallen angels and most likely a few stray exorcists, was none other than the executioner of the church, the infamous Hound of the Vatican known for his ability to tear through all his opposition, Naruto Uzumaki. The exorcist's face showed no emotion as his cold blue eyes gazed upon the wooden door leading to the enemy's base. Should he really kill her? The bespectacled youth, though, as he stood idly by. After all, she was a gentle and kind girl who was a victim of circumstance, a victim of the deviousness of the devils who tricked such a kind girl into doing a taboo. Though to not kill her would mean a lot of people would be mad and sad, he didn't want people to be mad and sad, so it was best to just kill one person in order to make the majority happy. In this case, a lot of people would be happy to find out that the fallen maiden has perished. But then again, she is Asia. The first in what he considered a short list of people who he considered precious to himself, a list of people that he had no doubts he was willing to die for if the situation were to arise. The gentle and kind girl who cared for him when he was injured. The kind girl who tried to play with him when he was younger. The warm and guiding light that shone in the darkness of his early life. Should he really kill her? To kill his first friend for the sake of the church. For the sake of the happiness of many. Naruto closed his eyes and took in a deep breath as he steeled his nerves. His mind already working into overdrive, trying to look for a way to solve this situation. Almost all of them ended with the girl dead on his feet. A faint pulse of demonic essence coming from nearby snapped Naruto out of his thoughts. Asia, the teen whispered before quickly shaking his head. There were no more room for hesitations. The time to act was now before the devils decided to interfere and blow this situation into bigger proportions. From here on out, anyone who got in his way was an enemy to be slain by his swords. No exceptions. Play Black Rock Shooter OST, Battle of BRS. Naruto took a deep breath before he clapped his hands together. Kekai no Jutsu, Shishiinjin. Barrier technique, for violent flames battle encampment, he yelled out. Four holy swords which he embedded around the perimeter of the church earlier created a large rectangular barrier which glowed brightly. Each sword released streams upon streams of sacred blue flames that engulfed the barrier, which was now made of intense pure blue sacred flames. Attached to the handle of the blades were slowly burning blessed papyrus that containing various seals, symbols, and runes which acted both as a timer and as a catalyst responsible for the erecting of this four-cornered barrier which incinerated all that came into contact with its walls, whether coming from the inside or out. "This will last me a good 30 minutes, exclaimed Naruto as he started making his way towards the main gate of the church. Before he could even take 2 steps, the exorcist was already forced to jump back several times until his back was near the very same barrier he erected to evade 3 spears of light. "Oh, what do we have here? A human?" said a rather smug feminine voice. "I was expecting some devils to attack us, but instead we get a human," complained an old-sounding guy. He looks so weak. "Nay guys, can I kill him?" asked a girl with a rather childish tone. Turning his head towards the source of the voices, Naruto found 3 fallen angels sitting on top of an old tree. He wasn't surprised at the presence of the 3 fallen angels as he detected them exiting the church the moment he finished erecting his barrier. "Why did you attack me?" "Ha ha ha, human like you expects us to answer your questions? That the best joke I've heard in years." The youngest looking one, a blonde girl, laughed out. The buxom fallen angel smirked. "We don't answer to you, human," she said in a condescending manner. The only man in the group crossed his arms around his chest. "Che, know your place, mongrel," the man snapped out. The first impression the exorcist got was that the 3 reeked of arrogance. From their words he already knew that they were underestimating him because he was only human, a being that they most likely consider inferior when compared to devils, angels, and fallen angels. When he was young, he recalled getting taught that everything in this world could be used as a weapon. An enemy's arrogance, superiority complex, and condescension were definitely things that the exorcist could use to his own advantage to devastate his adversaries. In essence, the fallen angels were physiologically and magically superior than he was, and if they took him seriously, then he would be in for a fight, but if they think of him as just a lowly human like all the others that could be killed by a throw of their spear, then they were grossly mistaken. He didn't really listen to the three as they continued to belittle and mock him for a good 3 minutes. They even introduced themselves, but he didn't pay attention. No, he didn't care about that or anything else they said at the point. He just opted to carefully evade every spear they tossed at him, while he patiently waited for one of them to lose patience and do something reckless and stupid. Like he predicted, eventually one of the fallen angels snapped. The smallest of the group, a girl with blonde hair and a petite body, created a lance of light which she wielded in her hand. She then decided to charge at Naruto without a care in the world, most likely thinking that he was easy pickings. After all, almost any human with decent knowledge of magic can erect a barrier. What he did was nothing special. Whoosh! The fallen angel soared through the air, flying straight towards the bespectacled blonde at speeds that would leave normal humans befuddled. A small smile tugged the side of the exorcist's lips. He was ready to prove them how wrong it was to underestimate your opponent. And so his eyes did its job as he carefully observed his incoming opponent. Almost immediately, the exorcist couldn't help but feel the need to shake his head at the fallen angel's charge. It was simple and head-on. Actually, it would have been effective if she had the speed to back it up, but alas, she was slower than the vampire he recently killed. That said, her attack was easily predictable to a point that even without concentrating his eyes on her, he could efficiently land a counterattack, or better yet, a killing blow with ease. Chances of victory was at a 99%, chances of performing a death blow in one hit 50%, chances of killing the foe in 2 blows 30%, chance of maiming the opponent then killing her with the follow-up attack 19%. He really liked his chances with this one. Thus the exorcist did nothing but wait until the girl was within his own reach. The blonde fallen angel had a smug smile on her face as her target did not move, making it easier for her to land what she thought would be her own killing blow. Swish! In one swift and fluid motion, the fallen angel thrusted her spear of light forward, the smug look on her face refusing to fade away as she watched her weapon get closer and closer into reaching her target and ending his pathetic life. It was then that the exorcist moved. Just as her spear was about to land on his chest, the exorcist allowed himself to follow the flow of her attack. His body moved as smooth as water while he took a step to the side, easily avoiding her blow. He then swirled around the length of her spear until he managed to close the distance between the two of them. For a second, his cold blue eyes met the fallen angel's own blue orbs. In a span of that very second, the exorcist's right hand lashed towards the fallen angel, catching her in surprise as he grabbed her by the back of her head. Naruto then twisted his body and used the fallen angel's momentum against her. The teen channeled a bit of his chakra on his hand before smashing her face rather violently against the barrier he erected, the very same barrier meant to burn anything in contact with it, whether touching it from inside or out. The blonde fallen angel immediately screamed out in pain. Her body squirmed and shook rather violently as her skin started heating up, then burning. The smells of flesh wafted in the air as smoke covered the fallen angel's face, while the skin, muscle, and bones of her face were charred intensely while in contact with the flaming barrier. Stab! Squelch! Her anguished shouts of pain were only silenced when the exorcist stabbed a holy sword in between his fingers and through her head, killing her on the spot. 2 moves, all it took were 2 moves of his part to kill the fallen angel. That's one down, whispered Naruto as he released his hold on the fallen angel's body and allowed it to fall lifelessly on the ground, splattering the burnt content of the head all over the ground, bringing forth a gut-wrenching sight of utter gore. So who's next? He asked, purposely using a bored tone to provoke his enemy. You bastard! The buxom dark-haired fallen angel garbed in an overcoat shouted as she charged in towards him in blind rage, a rage that the exorcist was already planning to use to his own advantage. As she was charging at him like a mad bull only seeing red, he could see that she was planning on just stabbing him with her spear, much like the first fallen angel attempted. She really should have learned after the first attempt that this kind of approach would not work against him. Unlike with the first fallen angel, he did not allow the second one to even come close to him. With a wave of his hands, 4 holy swords of light appeared in each hand. In a precise and almost automatic manner, the executor accurately tossed all 8 blades at the incoming fallen angel before jumping to his side to dodge the attack. Since she was charging at him in full force, the fallen angel was not able to dodge the swords that came at her at surprising speed. All 8 blades dug inside her body. 2 of the holy swords pierced through both of her wings, rendering them useless. 2 were stabbed on each of her arms, one going through her forearm and bicep, and the other pierced her from her palms and nearly sliced her arm vertically. The other 2 found their way in her legs, pinning her on the ground. The last 2 blades found their way to vital areas. Both blades were sticking out of her back, one around her liver, the other in her chest. A moment later, as he charged came to an abrupt halt, the trench coat-clad fallen angel fell on the ground screaming in agonizing pain. Naruto looked down on the seriously wounded and screaming fallen angel. Let that be a testament for not only underestimating your opponent, but also attacking in blind rage. He sighed as she continued to scream in pain and curse him out. Now that's 2. As soon as those words came out of his mouth, Naruto ducked and rolled away to evade getting mowed down by the only male fallen angel in the area. Swish. The exorcist then turned towards the fedora-wearing man and carefully dodged each thrust of the man's spear. High, low, mid, left, right, it didn't really matter, as he quickly got used to the man's speed and was able to react accordingly. The bespectacled blonde back flipped to avoid another wide-arcing swipe from the man's sacred spear. He landed just a few feet away from the body of the first fallen angel he slayed. "I guess you'll do for a warm-up, human," said the male fallen angel. "So you don't think I'm strong for defeating your comrades?" "They were weak. That's what you expect from women. The only thing they're good at is opening their legs and seducing others. Unlike me, I am a warrior. A fallen angel born for combat. You just got lucky against those whores." "So am I weak?" "Compared to me, yes. A pitiful human like you can never be as strong as me," the fallen angel boasted as he brandished his spear of light. The man was still underestimating him despite having already seen what he was capable of when he took down both of the man's comrades. Conclusion: the last fallen angel, what an idiot. Naruto held back a sigh. Seriously, what was up with every mythical/paranormal entity that he encountered? Why do they always have to look down on him for being human? Seriously, if any of them took him seriously from the start, then he would have been long dead. Then again, arrogance was the undoing of many of those creatures, and he just loved taking advantage of it. After all, everything is weapon in the battlefield. Naruto smirked as he attempted to provoke the last fallen angel. "Then why don't you come at me with all that you have?" The exorcist boldly pointed at his chest. "Here, stab me through the heart, O great one," he said in a mocking tone, trying to rile up the angel who fell from grace. "TSK? Who the hell do you think you are to tell me what to do, whelp?" The fallen angel roared out as he threw his holy spear at the blonde's chest, only for it to completely miss its target as the blonde jumped away from the spear's path. "You need to do better than that, old-timer," the sharply dressed man growled out as his wings flapped more violently, kicking up more wind around the area. With one strong flap, the man flew up in the air. "I've had enough of you, human!" yelled the fallen angel as another one of his holy spears materialized within the grasps of his hand. The fallen angel then dived towards him, spear in hand, following a straight line just like the previous fallen angels. Did they really think that he was that weak? "You can have all the strength in the world, but it won't matter as long as you can't hit me with it," Naruto whispered as he prepared to deal with the fallen angel. In a complete replay of what occurred against the vampire he fought a few weeks back, the blonde timed the charging of the fallen angel before jumping over the man. However, instead of raining down flaming swords upon his target, the blonde chose to just throw 8 of his holy swords at the man that stabbed him in several parts of the body and pinned him on the ground just a few inches away from the still living trench coat-clad fallen angel. Arrogance led to his downfall. Upon landing on the ground, 2 holy swords appeared in his hands. "D-damn you," choked out the still breathing female fallen angel. Naruto didn't bother listening to her. Instead, he clashed both of his swords, causing a spark to flash and ignite both blade in blue flames. What are you doing?" asked the male fallen angel as he tried to push himself off the ground but found himself unable to do so thanks to the swords that pinned him. "Purifying your souls, O arrogant creatures who fell from the light." He walked slowly towards the 2 living fallen angels who were struggling to either get up or writhing in pain. He stopped just a few steps in between the 2. "Ashes to ashes." He raised both of his azure-bathed swords up in the air. "Dust to dust." The exorcist simultaneously stabbed one of the burning swords in each of the bodies of the still living male and female fallen angels. As soon as they dug through their skins, the other swords that impaled the 2 were immediately released, torrents of blue flames from each blade which slowly burned the 2 fallen angels into oblivion. "May God forgive you for your sins." He released his grip from each blade and made the sign of the cross. "Amen," he said before walking away from the 2 slowly burning bodies as he made his way towards the church. The fallen angel's horrific pain-filled cries echoed loudly beneath the night sky. Kyokai no Ken. The same time. For Issei Haida that day felt like it was the longest day of his life. From the moment he woke up, the young devil immediately tried to convince his Bucho to help him rescue Asia. Of course, the high-ranking devil was against this endeavor, but not all was for naught as the rook Kaneko Tujo and the knight Yudo Kiba decided to join his party in hopes of rescuing his newest friend. After said recruitment, the young devil spent the entirety of the day hiding in the shadows of a building nearby the abandoned church where the nun was held captive as he, Kiba, and Kaneko planned out their assault of the enemy's stronghold. However, before they could even sneak in from behind the enemy's base, a bluish-like barrier made of fire formed around the area. If it was not for Kiba who quickly pulled him and Kaneko back, then they would have most likely been burned alive by those intense blue flames, holy flames. At first Yuto proposed a tactical retreat, saying that whoever placed the barrier was out of their league, but being the man who he was, Issei refused to retreat, and managed to convince the other two to try to find another way to get inside the church. They didn't exactly find a passageway of some sort of opening, but instead what they saw was a young man who looked around their age, wearing white clothes that gave him the appearance of a priest, standing in front of the wooden gates that lead to the abandoned church. Flying above the man were 3 arrogant-looking fallen angels. To say that they were shocked at what they witnessed shortly after would have been the understatement of the century. The 3 couldn't believe their eyes. What they bore witness to was not even a battle. No, for all intents and purposes what occurred could be described as a one-sided slaughter. Whoever the man was, he systematically took down all 3 fallen angels in a span of a minute or 2 without even breaking a sweat or taking a hit. It also didn't take a genius to figure out that this man was also responsible for the barrier that barred their entrance from the church, making him obviously dangerous. Just who was this man? Kiba and Kaneko helplessly thought as they stood outside the barrier, where they are forced to wait lest they want to suffer the same fate as the first fallen angel who suffered a rather gruesome demise. Issei, on the other hand, gritted his teeth in anger as he watched the scene. The man was stronger than he was, and from the way he saw the blonde move, the guy was as fast as Kiba. The young sacred gear wielder couldn't help but curse his weakness. "Stay safe, Asia," Issei whispered while clenching his fists with enough force to draw blood. He wanted nothing more than to go through the barrier and inside the church to rescue his friend, but for now he'll have to wait and leave the nun's fate to the exorcist. Kyokai no Ken. 15 minutes later. Blood was splattered across the walls of the abandoned church, spilled organs, sliced appendages, chunks of meat and gore scattered about on the church's floor as the smell of charred flesh from burning remains wafted the air to a sickening extent that would have made most who walked into the scene flinch at not only at the brutality of the scene but also at the sickening smell of death. Such was the fate of those who stood in the way of he who served as the sword of God, the hound of the Vatican, Naruto Uzumaki. Just like the other 3 outside, this fallen angel looked down on him along with the dozens of exiled exorcists that stood against his path, with the exception of one, a familiar-looking exorcist with silver hair who upon seeing him decided to flee immediately. A lone fallen angel by the name of Rainier was about to share the same fate. Located in the deepest regions of the church was a simple chapel. Unlike any other, there was a mystical altar in this chapel. A simple altar designed with magical circles and runes that was used for a ritual to forcibly extract the gifts given by God onto mortals. However, instead of its intended purpose in the altar lay not one who wields the gifts of God, but rather one who fell from God's grace, an angel who lost her way. Kneeling on the ground with her hands impaled into the altar by swords of light, and her legs pinned to the ground, was none other than Rainier. The swords went through the bones and meat of her legs as they continuously burned with blue flames that brought about unimaginable pain. Gone were the wings that she was once proud as it was sliced off and burned by the cold-blooded killer who stood in front of her. His once white and pure robes was splatter red in blood as he continued to look down on her with an apathetic gaze as if she were a bug, a wingless bug unable to get away from a greater predator. "No! No! This can't be happening!" she screamed in anguish, tears falling from the side of her eyes. It was not supposed to end this way. She was supposed to extract the sacred gear from the nun's body and use it to appease her master, not be in the receiving end of a rampaging human. No, he wasn't a human, he was a beast, a demon, a monster. "I don't deserve this, no. No! No!" she shouted out while a pair of cold blue eyes kept looking at her. Her killer knelt in front of her, his blue eyes meeting her own. "I kindly asked you to surrender, but you didn't heed my warning," he said, tone cold as ice. "Instead of surrendering, you mocked me and assumed I was inferior to you because I'm a human unlike you. That's the reason I won and you lost. Simple as that." "I was so close to completing my plan," she muttered out, by now no longer thinking straight as the pain began to erode her mind. Shaking his head, the exorcist slowly stood up, his robes fluttering about despite the lack of wind. "Have you said your prayers?" Naruto asked as a sword appeared in the grasps of each hand. She shook in fear, blood-red tears now streaming down her eyes as her life flashed before her very eyes. Azazel-sama. She cried out just before her head was severed from her body by the executor of the church. Amen. The blonde whispered while the blades of his mass-produced holy swords dematerialized before the very handles of the swords themselves disappeared within the sleeves of the blue-eye exorcist's clothes as the fallen angel's head rolled on the ground, a pained expression forever marred upon her face. How foolish! If you surrendered, you could have suffered a painless death. You just made it harder for yourself, the exorcist said exasperatedly before taking a deep breath and turning towards the last person within the chapel, the only witness to his spectacular macabre of death. You've grown since I've last seen you. He looked at the young woman in front of him from head to toe, immediately recognizing the changes upon her body. In more ways than one. He joked, trying to brighten up the mood, only to fail miserably as the girl just looked at him with a rather confused expression, most likely missing his joke. He sighed internally. Really, was it only he who made jokes and had a sense of humor in the church? Shaking his head, the blonde took another deep breath in order to clear his thoughts. It's been a long time, Asia, he said gently, making the girl's eyes slightly widen in recognition. It's been a few years since she last saw him when he acted as her bodyguard, but he hasn't changed that much. Same spiky blonde hair, same beautiful yet cold blue eyes, he even had the same face which betrayed little emotions. The only person aside from Issei that she thought would arrive here to rescue her from the hands of her captor. Her beloved friend from her youth. Naruto! The girl exclaimed happily as she ran towards the young man and quickly engulfed him in a warm hug, completely missing the rather pained expression on his face. It's been so long, she uttered, tightening her hold on the blonde, not noticing that his clothes were soaked in blood. Play Jigaku Shoujo OST Azome, piano version. Asia, do you know why I'm here? Those were the first words that left her fellow blonde's mouth after their brief reunion. She looked up to him and tilted her head to the side in a rather cute way. To save me? The girl innocently asked. To her, his arrival was a miracle of God, one of her prayers which was answered by the Holy Lord. He shook his head while slightly pushing her away, effectively breaking their hug and forcing her to take a few steps away. He took a deep breath, steeling his resolve as he revealed to her the contents of his missions to his friend. I was sent by the church to kill you. Asia's eyes widened as she felt the world collapse around her. What? How can that be? Why would they? She couldn't finish any of her sentences. Several string of words came out, but none could fully represent what she felt. It's because they want to appease the masses. You see, after you left, rather than calming down, the loyal followers of the church demanded that you were to be executed, beheaded, burned to a stake, or stoned. It really did not matter which method, but their wishes were clear. They want you to die, Asia, he admitted rather bitterly as he faced the exiled nun. He paused, taking a deep breath, allowing the girl a few seconds to process the information before he suddenly grinned. But to hell with them. Do you want to live? Asia, you're my friend, and I would do anything for you. If you want to, I can fake your death and bring you to a secluded place, away from the eyes of the church. You will no longer see any of us after that, but you shall live. Naruto asked in an almost pleading manner. He was sure he could create a false body, through the use of alchemy or even necromancy. He just needed a body that matched hers down to the very essence. If he burned that body until it was unrecognizable, then he might have a chance of saving her life while making everyone else happy. Yes, an effective way to get through the happiness of the many outweighs the happiness of the few, mantra that was one of his core principles. The nun stared at his eyes for a moment, her eyes meeting his normally stoic blue eyes that now showed a hint of desperation that seemed oh so foreign for the blonde. Asia smiled sadly and shook her head. No, I can't accept that. I don't wish to get you in trouble, Naruto. If they find out, they'll excommunicate you like they did to me, or worse. That, and the girl suddenly went quiet as if carefully thinking about her next choice of words. And I found people here who became my friends much like you were before I left the church. One even took me out on a date and brought me around the area. He showed me a lot of stuff and experienced a lot of things that I didn't know was possible. She looked slightly melancholic as she remembered the fun times with Issei. Naruto internally sighed. He knew this was a possibility. Is it the brown-haired devil boy? He couldn't help but asking, unintentionally revealing that he was shadowing her, meaning that he was well aware of the small date the girl had with the devil. If it was possible, I would want to have stayed here with them, but I know what you do and I know what you must do, the nun answered with a bit of hesitation in her part. There was a brief moment of silence between the two of them as the blonde exorcist began thinking about the best course of action. There was one that came to his mind, one that would assure Asia's happiness, but it would also mean committing a taboo on his part. An act that will turn her into that which he hunted down and killed. Are you happy? He asked, his voice showing no emotion. Huh? Are you happy? And I mean truly happy to be here in this city despite being surrounded by devils? Away from the church, away from me, he whispered the last part mostly to himself, and it seemed that even Asia didn't catch those sad words which would have most likely affected her response. Yes, I'm truly happy here, happy like those days we spent together when we were children. Happy before everything fell apart. I want you to be here with me when I enjoy this happiness, but I know it's not possible. You have a lot of responsibilities and I know that you're needed in other places. She took a second to take a deep breath, steadying herself as her eyes shined with resolve. If I'm allowed to be selfish even once in my life, then just allow me to be selfish this one time. I see. Naruto closed his eyes. If that was her choice, then there was no avoiding what was to come. This was a gamble on his part. There was 100% chance that he would succeed in his mission, whilst there was only a low chance that Asia would survive this encounter. He would respect her decisions. You know what that means, right? Asia stared at Naruto for what seemed like an eternity until his words finally sank in. Yes, replied the innocent maiden as tears threatened to spill from her eyes, a single tear being the first of the many to escape. Please don't cry, he whispered gently while wiping away a single tear that fell from her beautiful face. But you're going to taint your hands with my blood. You're going to sacrifice yourself, for the exorcist moved his hands, softly trailing down on her cheek where it stopped. He then leaned towards the nun, his lips landing on her own, catching her in a soft, chaste kiss that stopped any other words from escaping her mouth. To the nun it was like time stopped. The teen who was her first friend, her only friend before arriving here in Ko, and her former bodyguard was kissing her. If it wasn't for the direness of the situation, she'd be squealing in joy or be dumbfounded in shock, but instead the simple act nearly caused her eyes to break out into tears. Eventually their two parted lips, their kiss ephemeral. It's a burden I'm willing to carry for your sake, he said with his tone filled with kindness and gentleness. But this is wrong, this will make you sad. If being sad can bring you happiness, if it can bring other people happiness, then I wouldn't mind it at all. Naruto looked at her. His normally cold eyes showed a hint of warmth that has only been seen by a few in his life. So please smile, he begged her. I hate to see it when people I care for are sad. She tried to smile only to fail miserably as tears began falling out of her eyes. See, can you do something for me? Anything you want, he replied with no hesitation. Can you pray for me? She pleaded. He closed his eyes and broke his gaze from the now crying girl. You wish for me to pray for you? He asked, tone both soft and gentle. I've never seen you pray. Not even when we were in church. Not even when we grew together. For some reason you never prayed. So if it's okay with you, just pray for me. That's all I ask for you. Are you sure? The girl merely nodded silently as tears kept falling from her eyes. If that is your wish. Naruto closed his blue eyes as he recited a prayer, one of the few he uttered outside of combat. May he support us all the day long, till the shades lengthen, and the evening comes, and the busy world is hushed, and the fever of life is over, and our work is done, spoke Naruto as he reached for the holy sword strapped in his back, slowly unsheathing it from its scabbard, which was wrapped in several suppression seals to block out majority of its holy essence. If he was going to kill her, then she at least deserved to be killed by his strongest blade. The legendary true holy sword that his ancestor took from the dead body of an evil dragon that threatened to harm his children. It was one of the 3 sacred treasures of the second sage, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi. The blonde teen then fully pulled his magnificent blade out, allowing Asia to see. It was beautiful even to her who held little to no knowledge about swords. The holy blade was about 25 or 26 inches long, moderately curved and slender. Its single-edged blade that rose from its guardless handle promised an absurd amount of sharpness unlike anything she's ever seen on the face of this world. It was as if just staring at the silver holy edge was enough to make her feel that sword's sharpness along with the immense amount of holiness that just radiated from the blade. It's beautiful. The nun thought, admiring the beauty of the pure white and sacred blade while she listened to the exorcist's prayer. There in his mercy may he give us a safe lodging, and a holy rest, and peace at the last. He muttered the last phrases of the prayer, as he closed his eyes preparing himself for the inevitable. Amen, whispered Asia, realizing that indeed the prayer has ended. As the last wish from her friend was granted, the nun found herself closing her eyes as well. Amen, whispered Naruto, his soft and low tone echoing within the premise of the abandoned chapel. He opened his eyes and without any hesitation pointed the tip of his blade over the nun's chest, and with one swift thrust the exorcist stabbed Asia Argento through the heart. The exorcist allowed himself a few seconds of silence before pulling the sword out of the nun's body, which slowly fell on the ground, a small pool of blood immediately forming around the wound, her life essence quickly fading away. Within seconds she was dead, lying on the ground in a pool of her own blood. With a flick of his wrist, he removed her blood on his blade before returning the blade in its sheath. Naruto made a sign of the cross as he looked down at her body. He saw that she was smiling kindly despite her death. She looked so peaceful, so serene, so beautiful. Much like that distant memory of the past. She looked like a blue rose. A beautiful blue rose amidst a puddle of red. The sight actually made him feel a slight pang of pain in his chest for the act that he has committed, but by then there was no more room for regret. What's done is done. He just hoped that this was for the best. Play Elfen Lied OST, Lilium. The flickering of a small orange flame was the only semblance of light within a long and dark corridor. The small flame that burned brightly within the darkness came from none other than a candle being held by a boy. A young lad no older than 8 or so, who walked in silence along the dark passageway with only the small light to guide his path. Walking a few steps behind the boy was none other than one of his mentors, a large muscular man with silver hair and eyes that went by the name of Geralt. Do you remember Father Paulo? The heavy baritone voice of the old man reached the boy's ears, effectively breaking the silence between them and prompting him to give a silent nod in response. Can you tell me something about the good father? The older man asked. The younger boy nodded once more before he opened his mouth and responded to the question at hand. Father Paulo, he was good. He took care of I and a bunch of others kids in the orphanage a few years ago. He was nice, funny, and smart at the same time. He was the one who read me stories about the church and also the one who taught me how to read and write. I see. Is there a problem, master? The older man didn't bother responding. Instead, he took a few strides forward, passing the boy with ease. Before he could ask the reason for his mentor's actions, the old man gestured for him to quicken the pace, prompting the boy to run as fast as he could, careful not to drop the candle. Eventually, after a few seconds, the boy and the older man stopped walking as they reached a door at the end of the hallway. Child. Yes, master? Once we enter this room, you shall follow all my orders, understood? The boy nodded. I will, master. It was only thanks to the darkness that enveloped the corridor, along with the continuously shrinking flame, that the boy didn't see the ghost of a smile in the older man's face. Good. The man declared as he placed his hand upon the wooden door, and with one effortless push he opened the wooden entrance. The two then entered the room. It was an eerie room, one which had dirty gray-colored walls with various symbols and runes scribbled within them, which glowed an ominous red every now and then. The room was also barren, one which lacked any form of furnishing or furniture barring a single light bulb that glowed brightly on the ceiling, illuminating a single chair in the middle of the room where a man wearing blood-soaked tatters and a black sack on his head sat, or rather was bound into. Your task today is both easy and necessary for your advancement in the arts of an exorcist. Geralt walked towards the middle of the room and placed his hand upon the black bag that covered the man's face. In one swift move he pulled the bag off, revealing to the boy the familiar face of his gagged old caretaker, Father Paulo. The rattling sound of steel caught the boy's attention. Shifting his gaze, he found a knife was on the ground, just a few feet away from his feet. Kill him, the boy's teacher commanded. The boy looked at the knife for a moment before he leaned down and grabbed the object, grasping it within the palm of his hand. He took several steps towards the bound man, who looked at him with fearful eyes, showing nothing of the previous warmth-filled orbs that he encountered in his youth. Blue eyes gazed upon the knife in his hand and the pastor in the chair, his eyes quickly shifting between the two every few seconds. Why are you hesitating, my child? Because he was nice to me. I thought you said that you were going to follow all of my orders? But why? Why do I need to kill him? A sigh came out of the older man's lips. He was seen reading, studying, and incorporating the Quran, the holy text of Islam, into the teaching of the church. You know full well that the text is banned from the church, and for breaking the law of God he deserves death. A one-way trip to the flames of hell where he will burn for all eternity. The older man took several steps, stopping behind his student and placing both of his hands on the boy's shoulder. For breaking the laws of God he is considered a demon, a devil, a heretic, a heathen. He brings forth sadness and misfortune. He must die, he must perish according to the laws of our Creator. The old man could still see hesitation on the boy's eyes, but decided to repeat his earlier order. Kill him. Is this? Naruto looked down on the knife. Right. It is my son, the priest said using a kind and grandfatherly tone. It is. Tell me, when have I ever lied to you? His student was silent for a moment, apparently deep in thought, before he responded. Never, Master Geralt. Never indeed now go unvanquished the source of sadness in the world vanquish it, and make not only me but also those who suffered by his hands happy. You like that, don't you? Making people happy? The older man said, barely retraining a grin as he saw a flash of understanding envelop the look of sadness within his pupil's eyes. If you kill him, a lot of people in the church will be happy. Even your friend, that young nun, may be happy as well. Those words were enough to convince the boy. Turning towards his old caretaker, the boy slowly raised the knife in his hands, his blue eyes taking in the look of sheer horror in the bound pastor's eyes before he brought the knife down without hesitation. He repeated the process several times, raising and bringing down the knife until the man bound in the chair was no longer struggling and screaming in muffled pain, while at the same time ignoring the strange and painful sensation that he felt within his chest. Several hours later, the boy could be found standing by himself in front of a garden filled with blue roses, beautiful, unnatural roses that were appealing to his eyes. So distracted was he to the beauty of the flowers that he failed to notice both the dark clouds looming in the sky as well as the arrival of his close friend. "Good afternoon, Naruto." The girl greeted the boy with an exaggerated wave of her hand as she ran towards her friend. Normally, after calling out and greeting her friend, he would respond with a kind greeting of his own. It has been that way ever since they met and became friends long ago, but for some reason, that day the boy didn't respond to her greeting. "Naruto?" Asia asked with a worried look on her face as she lightly tapped her fellow blonde's shoulder, finally getting his attention. The boy's eyes slightly widened in surprise before they went back down to their usually impassive forms. "Asia? When did you get here?" "I got here a few seconds ago." I'm sorry if I didn't greet you properly, I was a bit distracted." "Are you okay? Did anything happen?" The boy froze for a moment before he quickly tried to wave the girl's concerns off. "It's nothing important." "Mew." She puffed her cheeks as she looked down on the ground, her hands crossing on her back as she kicked in the floor. "If something's bothering you, you can tell it to me. That's what friends are for, right?" "I guess so." The boy took in a deep breath. As far as he knew, there were no secrets between he and his first friend, as they shared almost everything together. Today, for some reason, he knew that telling her that he killed someone might make her unhappy, and he didn't like seeing her unhappy, so he twisted his words, forming somewhat of a half-truth. "Saw someone die." The nun gasped, placing her hand upon her mouth. "That's sad," she said as she quickly made a sign of the cross and closed her eyes in order to pray for the departed despite not knowing who they were. She was such a kind girl. As the girl prayed for the life he took, the boy's eyes went back to the blue roses, watching them closely as they swayed upon the winds of the small breeze that passed. After a moment of silence, a single question came from the blonde-haired nun. "Did you know the person who passed away?" "Yes, you could say that I knew him well. You see, he took care of me when I was younger, taught me how to read, how to write. He was kinda like a father to me before I met Master Geralt." "Then are you be sad that he died?" "Sad? People feel sad when they see others, especially when it's people that they know or are close to them that dies." The young nun placed a hand on her friend's shoulder. "Naruto, are you sad?" I'm not really sure." The boy placed his hat atop his chest, right where his heart is supposed to be. "I don't feel bad, but I don't feel good as well. I feel neutral. Yes, neutral would be the perfect word for it. But despite this feeling, I can also feel something painfully tugging in my chest." His gaze shifted back to the girl who was looking at him with eyes full of worry. "Do you like being sad?" She shook her head, causing her golden locks to flail about in the wind. "I don't like being sad. If possible, I want to be happy as much as possible." "So then, is being sad bad?" "Not really, it's okay to be sad." "Asia, what do you do when you're sad?" When I'm really sad, I kinda cry. I cry and cry until the tears stop, until the pain in my chest is gone, until the sad feeling is gone." "I see." The boy's eyes shifted from his friend as he now looked upon the blue roses planted in the garden. "Should I cry then?" "Are you feeling sad?" "My chest hurts a bit when I think of the person who died. It hurts so much." He looked at his friend, his blue eyes meeting her green orbs. "I think so. I think I'm sad." After those words came from his mouth, the boy suddenly found himself engulfed within the arms of Asia. A warm and slightly awkward hug due to the fact that he was quite bigger than her. "Then it's okay to cry." The boy looked up to the sky, a hollow look marring his face. "To cry, huh?" he said as his hands surrounded the girl's, enveloping her in a hug of his own. As he looked up, the boy saw flashes of light from the darkened sky, which was followed by the first droplets of rain that descended from the heavens. He didn't cry, he couldn't. The concept of sadness was still too foreign for his young mind. So instead of crying and screaming at the heavens, the boy opted to stare the cloudy black sky in a hollow manner, as he hugged his dear friend ever so closely, accepting the gesture as her way of trying to cheer him up. 2 large drops fell in both of his bright blue eyes, forcing him to blink for but a moment as the droplets cascaded down the outer sides of his eyes. The droplets slowly fell down in such a way that a trail was left down the side of his face, marring his cheeks, before the droplets fell to the ground. It was as if he was crying in the rain. Kyokai no Ken. Play Jigaku Shoujo OST, Eikenai Samaru. Pools of crimson blood. There was blood everywhere. Every nook and cranny of the dull gray-colored walls of this corridor were stained red with the crimson essence of life. Scattered on the floor were severed or scorched remains of heads, arms, legs, and organs of what could be barely recognized as humans. To say that it was a sickening sight would be a gross understatement. As Issei Hayadu and his allies ran through this path, the pawn couldn't help but feel a deep foreboding sense of dread to form in the pit of his stomach. This was 100 times worse than what he saw when his client was attacked and killed by that insane exorcist freed during one of his contracts gone wrong. This was on a whole other level. The amount of slaughter and gore that his group has encountered when they entered the church was more or less an accurate depiction of what would have probably gone on inside a slaughterhouse. So much blood, so much gore, so much death. It was that bad, to the point that it made him want to stop running, walk to the side of a room or possibly a place within the church without blood and barf his dinner, lunch, and probably even breakfast out. He couldn't just stomach through it. This scene didn't really make him feel any semblance of relief about Asia's safety, as for all he knew, whoever did this, whoever killed these men and the fallen angels outside, could have attacked Asia as well. His throat felt dry all of a sudden as it quickly replaced the urge to vomit. He hasn't been a devil for so long, but he knew that the exorcist who did this was definitely strong, perhaps much stronger than Freed. Though the question was if the man, that exorcist, shared Freed's mentality. Just that thought made him shudder in fear. If this man were as insane and vicious as Freed was, then there was a chance that their group were walking like sheep to a slaughter. Looking to his side, he saw Kaneko and Kiba, his fellow devils, who both looked relatively calm despite all the blood and gore. This actually made him wonder just how much violence the two has seen, if such a view couldn't even elicit as flinch or slight paling of the skin among them. "Do you guys think we're going to have to fight whoever did this?" Issei asked as he ran through the hall, blood splashing with his every footstep. "Don't worry, Issei-kun, if anything happens I will protect you," Yoro Kiba replied with his ever-present sparkling Bishounen smile. Dang creepy smile that just sent the wrong messages, but somehow at that moment he couldn't feel the usual creepiness, as it was drowned out by the ominous feeling that assailed him. "We will beat him," Kaneko replied with her usual cold indifference. Despite the lack of any fancy uplifting speeches, Issei couldn't help but actually feel a bit more confident in their endeavor. After all, his fellow devils were infinitely stronger than he was. They did take apart that stray devil with ease, showing that they were good fighters, at least better than him. Surely all 3 of them wouldn't have trouble with fighting against a human exorcist when it came down to it, right? He was just human after all, right? As if to answer his question, there was suddenly an intense feeling of dread in the air. It was as if the entire surrounding was flooded with what could only be described as an intense feeling that brought about sheer fear, a primal instinctual fear that was telling him to run away. Maybe because whatever this presence was radiated an extreme amount of holiness, divinity, and light, the like of which he has never experienced to date. He looked at Kiba and Kaneko for some explanation. Kaneko was still impassive, but her body was quite tense, showing that even she was unnerved by the feeling, while Kiba, however, had wide eyes and was staring blankly towards the direction that the feeling was coming from. It was as if he recalled or was experiencing something that was already familiar to him. They didn't bother replying to him, but instead the 2 senior devils ran towards a nearby staircase that led to the basement. It didn't really take much thinking that wherever that feeling came from was where the exorcist was. Whether he was with Asia, though, was yet to be determined. Despite the lingering feeling of dread in his system, the young devil followed on, hot on the tail of the 2 devils as he ran. He ran as fast as he could, as much as he could, and quite frankly he has never ran this much his whole life. He ran through a set of stairs. He ran over a pile of bodies. He ran across a pool of blood. He ran until he reached a slightly open door stained with blood. He ran until he reached the 2 other devils entering the room and finding himself in a rather large chapel light by small lamps with several wooden benches. Surprisingly, the underground chapel looked as if it was as big as the main cathedral above. He then stopped running, stopping in between Kaneko and Kiba. The color quickly drained from his face as he absorbed the scene that he saw. There was an altar depicting the crucified Son of God. Before the altar stood none other than the exorcist he saw outside. An exorcist clad in previously white garments, which were stained red in blood. Although his attention wasn't aimed at the exorcist but rather at the person the exorcist was looking at, same golden blonde hair, same nun clothes, same peaceful and kind expression, a slightly paler skin. It was no doubt the person he was looking at was Asia. He was looking at the nun he befriended lying on the ground surrounded by a puddle of red. There was stab wound on her chest through her heart. She was surrounded by blood, her blood. Asia was gone, she was dead. That was the sight that both welcomed and shocked Issei Haidu as he entered the deepest regions of the abandoned church. The very sight that shook the entire foundation of his core. For a moment no one moved, as if enacting the calm in what would be an otherwise chaotic and devastating storm. The exorcist's attention was solely on Asia, his blue eyes never leaving her body. It was as if the man didn't notice or didn't even care about their presence. Kiba stood beside Issei, his eyes calculating as his gazed upon the exorcist, specifically the sword resting on the person's back. The knight's mind already moving and working in overdrive as it led him to the conclusion that he wanted the exorcist dead for possessing the sword. A true holy sword. On the other hand, Kaneko sent a rare worried glance at Issei before her eyes shifted from the young devil towards the exorcist, then the nun, and then back to Issei. Even thought she wasn't one to normally show emotion, it didn't mean she was a heartless bastard. In fact, she felt empathetic towards Isei's plight. The brown-haired teen's eyes, however, were still locked on to the body of Asia. A range of emotions were reflected upon his light brown eyes: horror, sadness, anguish, pain, hate, and eventually anger. Anger which was directed not only to himself but also the exorcist standing in front of her peaceful and lifeless body. Predictably, out of everyone in the large chapel, it was Issei who was the first to snap out of his silent contemplation. Without any hesitation, the sacred gear user ran towards the exorcist who just killed his friend. Asaya! Issei roared as he charged at the bespectacled priest, his left arm already cocked back, like the hammer of a gun. In a flash of sparkling red light, a gauntlet appeared over the brown-haired boy's arm. Boost, he shouted, and as if acting like a trigger to gun, he sent his red armor-clad fist flying towards the exorcist. The first punch thrown before all hell broke loose. Kyokai no Ken. Naruto's eyes never left Asia, his blue eyes gazing upon her fallen form. If it weren't for the blood surrounding her body, then one could think that the pretty nun was just sleeping, a peaceful, calm, and serene sleep. Without even noticing it, his right hand moved towards the top of his chest, over his heart. He could feel a dull pain emanating from it. It wasn't much of a physical one, more akin to something that went beyond the cells and muscles. Regret was rearing its ugly head once more. The pain showed that, but what's done is done. There's supposed to be no more room for regrets. But why did he still feel the dull pain over his chest? Perhaps it was because he didn't apologize to her for her actions? Maybe that was it. He was regretting not being able to tell her sorry before he killed her. Play Oda Nobuena no Yabu Ost Kishu. He opened his mouth in an attempt to let out a string of apologetic words when his senses suddenly kicked in, alerting him of an incoming hostile presence. The exorcist turned his head towards the newcomer, his body already reacting on instinct, ready to draw a blade out from under his sleeves so that he could lash out and retaliate on his would-be attacker. The exorcist's blue eyes widened when he recognized his attacker, the brown-haired boy that was with Asia. The devil that made her happy. Yo, the blonde whispered as he hesitated to strike down the devil, causing the teen's punch to land cleanly on his face. A boosted punch with enough strength to launch him towards a nearby wall. However, before his back could crash and create a man-sized crater in the wall, the exorcist twisted his body in midair so that his feet met the wall. With light kick, the exorcist managed to bounce off the wall and land on the floor unscathed except for the small cut on his lip. The bespectacled exorcist wiped the fresh blood off of his now busted lips. The devil boy was all he could say before he found himself taking a few steps back, suddenly on the defensive as the brown-haired devil attacked. It looks like my barrier went down earlier than expected, Naruto whispered to himself as he slowly weaved his body around to evade several wild jabs coming from the infuriated brown-haired devil who came charging in with reckless abandon. I've already completed my mission, Naruto stated as he continued to dance around Issei's attacks. I no longer have any business here, so if you were to be kind enough, can you allow me to leave? I really don't want to start any trouble here, and I'd rather not fight, he admitted as he carefully dodged several sloppy punches coming from an infuriated Issei. Stop dodging, you asshole. I'm not in the mood to fight, and if I do so I might just lose what little of the self-control I have left and kill everyone in this room, and despite me wanting to and having a living involving killed devils, I would make an exception now and not kill any of you cause she won't like that, Naruto said in a flat tone, his voice barely showing any emotion, which only succeeded in further infuriating the brown-haired boy. From the sidelines, Kaneko and Kiba watched the battle unfold. The latter only now noticing the dulled or diluted foreboding presence coming from the exorcist, or more precisely coming from that katana sheathed within the seal-filled scabbard behind the man. It didn't take a genius to figure out that it was a holy sword, and not just one of those mass-produced ones. No, that sword in the bespectacled exorcist's hand was no doubt one of those true holy swords. Looking through the side of her vision, Kaneko found that Yuto's eyes were being shadowed by his hair, his emotions unreadable. Turning her head back to Issei, she found that the newly reincarnated devil was fiercely attacking the exorcist, who effortlessly evaded all his blows. So far, the exorcist hasn't shown any hostility towards them despite Issei attacking, but just in case, the rook readied herself for battle by putting on her gloves around her hands, her gaze shifting towards their ever-impassive adversary. I already took one thing from her today, and I'd prefer not to take another, to not take the reason she wanted to stay in this city, the exorcist said as he avoided an uppercut from the sacred gear user. He had to leave, best to make his escape sometime soon, as it wasn't an all-too-wise move in his part to try and battle against what was most likely the peerage of either the Citri or the Gremory family. Though if the group kept attacking him as he made his retreat, then he had no other choice than to fight back and defend himself. Issei gritted his teeth in frustration as none of his attacks landed. The teen uttered "boost" one more time before trying to punch the bespectacled blonde in the face, emphasis on try, as the exorcist quickly grabbed his extended hand before delivering a devastating kick to the sacred gear user's gut, followed by an upward palm strike to the chin that quickly brought the devil down to his knees. Seeing this as a potential opening for escape, Naruto tried to reach for one of the pockets of his jacket and pull out a handy flash bomb he can use. The word "tried" as a blur of yellow swiftly charged toward his direction. It seems that his actions were interpreted incorrectly by the other two devils, who most likely found him kicking their ally as a sign of aggression, or at least by one of the two who decided to join the fray. Naruto had no time to draw the flash bomb. He had to defend himself lest he wanted to die by his new attacker's blade. Shing. The sharp sound of metal cutting through the air echoed within the small chapel. The handsome devil with blonde hair swung his sword towards the exorcist. Shing. An equally sharp sound came from the exorcist, who quickly pulled out a single holy sword from his sleeve, which he swung in order to block the incoming attack. Clang. The two blades met, clashing against each other, resulting in the sound of steel meeting steel echoed about, accompanied by small amounts of spark that appeared between the two blades. Now that was just plain rude, Devil-san. Can't you see I'm trying to leave? I told you guys that don't want to fight. I'm not in the mood to kill heathens, he said rather sourly as he firmly pushed his swords against the devil's own, causing more sparks to mar the cathedral's room. But if you persist on your actions, then I'd have no choice to retaliate it in kind, Naruto warned, just in case things escalated even further. And escalate it did. After those words left his mouth, a sense of imminent danger radiated from the devil's body. It was as if his sixth sense warned him of an incoming imminent treat. Putting his trust of his instincts, the bespectacled blonde pushed his blade forward, causing the devil swordsman to stagger back. He quickly took a few steps back, away from the blonde swordsman, just in time to avoid no less than a dozen swords appearing out of the ground and impaling the spot he stood mere seconds ago. Naruto's cold blue eyes momentarily shifted at the blades which would have taken his life. He swiftly appraised each blade and observed that all were different. Each blade was unique in one form or another, but all had one glaring similarity. They all radiated energy, which was the direct antithesis to the light energy that his mass-produced swords emitted. Demonic swords? Naruto said as he stared at his new opponent, fully taking in his fellow blonde's appearance for the first time. The devil has short blonde hair and could be described as a poster boy for the pretty boy category. The devil was probably around his age. The demonic sword user was wearing a school uniform that he'd seen a few times in the city whilst wielding yet another demonic sword. However, it wasn't the silver-edged demon sword in the devil's hand, nor the devil's ability to summon demonic swords out of thin air that grabbed the exorcist's immediate attention, but rather it was the expression on his fellow blonde's face. He wore a twisted look filled with unadulterated rage, anger, and malice, all of which were directed solely at him. You! Naruto blinked, completely confused at the intense hostility that the devil was showing. Me? Is that sword the one strapped on your back one of the true holy swords in this world? Well, yeah. Why'd you ask? The exorcist answered truthfully, seeing as there wasn't really anything wrong with telling the devil about that. After all, it wasn't really a secret that he carried around a true holy blade with him at all time. The answer to his short question came in the form of 3 newly created demonic swords that were shot like a bullet, cutting through the air and flying towards him with the promise of absolute violence and pain. Of course, Naruto responded in kind. With a wave of both of his hands, 3 swords appeared in each of his hands, totaling 6. He then quickly threw all 6 blades, 3 aimed at the incoming blades and the other 3 aimed at the devil. Clang clang asterisk asterisk clang asterisk. In a loud clash of steel against steel, each blade hit and counteracted one another, causing sparks to fly in the air as the swords embedded themselves in the hard granite ground. Whoosh whoosh asterisk asterisk whoosh asterisk. 3 sacred blades flew in the air, slightly curving as they pierced through the dark room as they came shooting at a speed comparable to that of a bullet towards the devil. Acting almost on instinct, Yuto brought up his demonic sword, a silver blade with black ornate decorations, parried all 3 blades with 2 strokes of his own. His eyebrows furrowed, his eyes widened and then narrowed as his glare towards the exorcist heated to unnaturally high levels due to the fact that he found about 20 more blades heading towards him, all of which aimed directly at his limbs, most likely thrown to incapacitate him and take him out of the combat. He didn't even see the exorcist move and throw the blades. Gritting down on his teeth in frustration, the knight found himself swinging his demonic sword around several times in order to parry the rain of sacred blades. While Kiba was busy dealing with the swords, Naruto opted to place his hand upon the pockets of his jacket in order to draw out the flash bomb again. Sadly, his escape was rendered null once more. He found 2 wooden benches flying towards his place courtesy of the petite white-haired devil. The bespectacled exorcist sighed. "This is proving to be troublesome," he said as he took out 6 swords, 3 in between each knuckles of his 2 hands. Turning towards the fast-approaching benches, the bespectacled youth brought it upon himself to strike down the first bench, causing it to explode into a pile of splinters. He then ran towards the second one and jumped on the airborne bench, which he used to launch himself towards the smaller devil, who by then already took up a combat stance. However, as he approached the petite devil, a slight spike of demonic magic caught his attention. Briefly shifting his eyes towards the source, he found that it was the brown-haired devil. Boost! The devil's left arm was extended forward, aimed right at him. Within the palm of the crimson-red gauntlet floated a crimson-colored orb. A destructive magical bullet. Dragon shot! Issei cried out as he fired off the small ball of energy. Gone was the small crimson orb. In its place was a burst of crimson-colored beam of destruction which exploded outwards. It was a bright beam of demonic energy that would have most likely incapacitated or killed Naruto if not for the fact that the beam lacked control. The waves of the beam scattered about rather chaotically, allowing the bespectacled exorcist to twist his body in midair to avoid the path that beam took. Boom! The granite ceiling above him, however, was not that lucky, as a hole with the size enough to fit 1 person was formed in it, just as Naruto landed in the ground prematurely, causing him to abandon his assault on Kaneko and instead refocus his attention on Issei, who he now deemed as a bigger threat to his escape. He quickly tossed 6 blades at Kaneko, who jumped away to avoid it, not wanting to test the metal of the blades, and 6 more at Yuto, who parried it with his demonic blade as a distraction before he sped towards a kneeling and panting Issei. Channeling chakra to his legs, the exorcist kicked off the ground and shot himself towards the sacred gear user. Smash! The brown-haired devil found himself coughing out rather harshly as the exorcist's fist landed on his abdomen once more. Issei was then subjected into a flurry of kicks and punches that marred his body with painful contusions. However, being one not to back down, Issei cocked his fist back and tried to counter-attack by throwing a haymaker at the bespectacled youth. Sadly, Issei's attack never reached its intended target as the exorcist grabbed his incoming fist, used it to vault his body up, and then landed behind Issei, giving him the opportunity to land 2 simultaneous chakra-empowered body blows which sent the brown-haired devil crashing towards a nearby wall with a loud thud. The exorcist then quickly bent his own knees as he channeled chakra towards his legs, and with an explosion of power he shot himself off the ground, towards the hole created in the ceiling by the devil's attack in order to finally make his escape. "You guys really won't let me escape, will you?" Naruto asked as a holy sword appeared in each hand. Slightly turning his head to his side, he saw that his fellow blonde jumped from the ground and was charging at him head-on with his sword in hand. If it weren't for the fact that Naruto was trying to avoid invoking the wrath of the Gremory or the Citri, this situation would have already been a 95% deathblow for the demonic sword user. By charging in recklessly, the blonde devil was open to no less than 5 deathblows, all of which involved death through the means of being impaled by several holy swords. But alas, he couldn't afford the risk of starting a war. He could just imagine the amount of paperwork that will be thrown at him if that were to happen. There was also the fact that the church may try to excommunicate and kill him, and so the bespectacled exorcist didn't go out of his way and kill the devil. Rather, his eyes focused on the flow of his fellow blonde's blades, finding the style's weakness, and opting to take advantage of said weakness by swinging his blade at it, forcing the enraged devil to stop his charge and switch to defense. In a span of a second, the knight and the exorcist exchanged no less than 10 blows, as sparks rained down on the chapel beneath them, for there was maelstrom high above the air in the form of a fierce storm of holy and demonic swords clashing and crashing against one another. It was fierce exchange that resulted in the defeat of the devil, as the exorcist found a way to snake his leg within Kiba's guard, enabling him to land a kick to Kiba's chest that sent the knight crashing down towards several benches that broke his fall at the cost of the destruction of his 2 swords. Much to his frustration, his brief exchange with the devil forced Naruto to land in the ground, though as his feet met the granite floor he once again shot himself upwards towards the hole in the ceiling, only to find himself failing to reach his escape route once more due to sudden interference by the devils. This time another bench was thrown at him, and predictable, he slashed it in two, causing it to yet again explode into chunks and splinters of wood. What he was not expecting, however, was for the petite girl who he has yet to exchange blows with appear behind the explosion of wood. A distraction? Naruto muttered as he carefully observed his new opponent. He was still in midair, so it was a bit disadvantageous if he were up against a queen or so, but if she was a pawn or a rook, then there was a good chance for him to easily incapacitate her. So instead of attacking, he watched as the girl cocked her fist back before suddenly releasing it in the form of a strong punch. A very strong punch. Yet despite its strength, the punch was slow. Really slow. To his eyes, which were trained to keep up with speeds equal to that of high-class devils and knights, it was as if she was moving through molasses. Slow. He voiced his opinion as his left hand snaked around her incoming fist. From there on it was as if time slowed down, as several things happened in a span of a few seconds. There was no way he could overpower her, that much was true, but with the subtle application of his inferior strength he could manage to at least misdirect the attack. With that in mind, his hand moved towards the white-haired girl's elbow and he tapped it in order to redirect her blow. Not only forcing her attack to miss him by quite a margin, but also allowing him to guide his body along the length of her arm. With a strong downward push in the shoulder and the help of gravity, the blonde exorcist sent the petite devil into a slow descent. As she fell back to the ground, Naruto placed his feet upon the small of her back, fully intent on using her as a dashboard to give him the last extra boost needed to get into that hole and ceiling and out of this place. He stomped down on Kaniko's back, launching himself upwards towards the hole. He was seconds away from passing it, but was forced to once more abandon his endeavor as his senses kicked in and alerted him of the incoming danger in the form of about 20 demonic swords, all flying towards his escape route. 0% chance of passing through without getting skewered to death by the demonic swords. Shifting his gaze towards the direction in which the blade came from, he found that it was none other than the blonde devil responsible for the attack. Did you just copy my attack? He really didn't know how he should feel that his technique was copied by someone, much less a devil of all people. Then again, he did just copy his moves from Seal and Alexander Sensei. The demonic sword user didn't bother replying, as he opted to just create several more demonic blades out of thin air before firing them like bullets towards the exorcist. Naruto simply clicked his tongue as he shifted the trajectory of his body so that his feet landed on the ceiling. With an extra application of chakra, he rolled against the ceiling to avoid a follow-up pelting rain of demonic blades. He then removed the chakra in the soles of his boots, allowing him to fall on the ground once more while also evading a few more swords. As he descended, the bespectacled youth's eyes darted all over the chapel. Near the still unscathed altar was Asia's ever-peaceful body. Opposite to him was the blonde, ever-glaring devil who had a cut on his cheek along with blood trailing down the side of his mouth along with beads of sweat falling on his forehead. To the sword user's far left was none other than the brown-haired devil. He was standing up while his legs shook weakly, body beaten, and obviously exhausted but still rearing for a fight, as evidence when the boy uttered the word, "boost," once more. That one really had a backbone to him, almost admirable if it weren't for the fact that he was a devil. Wait a sec. Where did the little one go? A sudden shift in the air accompanied by a spike of demonic energy finally alerted him of the last person he was looking for, the very same person who was coming from his blind side. He slightly turned his head and found that it was indeed the small girl approaching him, poised to attack with the wooden bench she held in her hand as if it weighed like nothing, wielding it as if it were an axe. Smash. She swung the thing like a bat, smashing it against the entirety of his body. The bench snapped in two as his body was sent flying towards the wall where the brown-haired devil stood. Externally he still looked calm and collected, but on the inside he was scolding himself for making such a rookie mistake. He took his eyes off all his opponents, especially the one who was currently the biggest treat. Knock him out, he heard the petite devil say before her words were drowned out by a disgruntled shout from the devil that Asia befriended. Boost. Huh. His cold blue eyes shifted towards the voice, and there he found Issei Hayadu forming yet another magical bullet in the palm of his gauntlet-clad hand. This one looked a bit smaller than the one before, most likely due to the banged-up state of the devil. However, the real problem stemmed from the fact that there was no way for him to evade the attack without taking any damage. There was no dodging this one as he was heading straight at the charging boy at the speed of a flying bullet. There was no choice. Since he could not evade, it was best to just fight magic with magic. Dragon Shot. The devil cried out as he fired off majority of his energy in the form of red blast of destructive energy. It was infinitely weaker than the earlier shot, but Naruto knew that getting hit by that meant incapacitation, death, and defeat, such as the limitations of a human body. Truth be told, Naruto didn't really like using his magic or ninjutsu that much, as he considered it to be more of a supplement for his combat capabilities, but when push comes to shove, it is still safe to know that he is proficient in various types of the arcane arts. He was also extremely proficient with one element, the very same element wielded by the Seraph Uriel. Yes, Naruto Uzumaki was extremely adept in using fire, apparently something he inherited from his father. A fitting element for one who brought forth death and destruction towards heathens. As he flew towards Issei, the descendant of the sage shifted his body so that his face was aimed towards Issei. His hands then moved, clasping one another with his index finger and thumbs up straight pointed towards his mouth. Taking in a deep breath, the blonde felt heat kneading inside his body. It swiftly grew in intensity, begging it to be released. He gladly complied. Shinka, Gokakyu, Sacred Flame, Great Fireball, the exorcist said with the same flat tone as usual before he opened his mouth and released a massive blue orb of fierce roaring sacred flames that was sent flying towards the beam's direction. A precise concentrated ball of sacred blue flames against a scattering beam of power with no control or precision. It was no contest. The sacred blue flames devoured the red beam before it continued heading towards the sacred gear user, who was lucky enough to duck and roll away from the path of the blue fireball in order to avoid incineration. Lucky for him, he fully avoided the fireball, which melted through the chapel's walls, creating a large hole upon its wake. However, what Issei didn't avoid Naruto, who upon coming to a stop rushed at the still recovering Issei, successfully landing a chakra kick along Issei's chest. The force of the blow was enough to send Issei crashing through the wall of the chapel right next to the one created by the blue fireball and out of the battlefield into another part of the underground layers of the abandoned church. That's one down, Naruto remarked as he flipped in the air and landed down on the ground. The sacred gear user would probably find his body hurting for a while, but at least he won't be dead. Though he did feel a form of satisfaction within him for kicking the ass of the devil that Asia befriended, but he put that thought in the back of his mind since he wasn't a vengeful or jealous person. Definitely not. Play Escaflowne OST, Dance of Curse. Naruto released a sigh in frustration as his senses picked up on an incoming attack. I would doubt beating your companion would make you guys back off, he uttered as he quickly ducked to avoid getting beheaded by a demonic sword before he rolled away from his previous spot to avoid getting smashed to pieces by a surprisingly strong axe kick from the petite girl that created a small crater upon the floor. That quickly narrowed down his suspicions that the girl was a rook. But it seems that I have mistaken. They would in no doubt stop him from ever using his flash grenade, so that option was moot. There was the teleportation method with the use of biblical texts, much like the one Alexander Sensei used in the past, but that move required him to be idle for a few seconds, something he was sure the devils wouldn't give him. He could always kill all of them. That's the easiest option of them all. He could cut off the brown-haired boy's hand to slice his head off, he could burn his fellow blonde alive in a sea of blue flames, and he could impale the petite girl several times with his hot holy blade until she was screaming. For some reason that last one didn't really sound right. It was as if he committed a form of crime by just mentioning or thinking about it. He sighed. Despite my job and my vow to annihilate all heathens from the face of this world, I really don't want to kill any of you at the moment. He has taken one too many lives that day after all. Naruto brought out two swords, both quickly used to parry and block several strikes from the enraged knight, who despite his injuries was still moving in extreme speeds. After a brief exchange that ended with him pushing the swordsman back, the exorcist found himself being approached by the slower but more powerful rook. With a flick of his wrist, he then threw no less than 6 blades at her, forcing the girl to stop her charge and jump aside to avoid getting impaled by the holy swords. I've already knocked one of you down, and I hoped that would distract you two enough to allow me to escape, but it seems that it only made you two even more mad. He quickly parried several strikes from Kiba before opting to take a few steps away from the devil, who he pushed back after the exchange. That said, I see that as of now retreat is not an option. You devils have left me no choice. A spine-chilling cold aura erupted from the mild-mannered exorcist. His face still impassive, but there was a hint of underlying savageness was slowly seeping out. I will not kill anyone, but I will be forced to incapacitate you two before I leave. With a push of a proverbial button, Naruto switched gears, shifting from his relatively defensive fighting style to one more offensive-oriented. The effects were immediate. His holy swords were bathed with a wreath of blue flame as he charged at Kaneko with no restraint. Whoosh. He easily avoided a punch from the girl, who despite all her strength lacked the necessary speed in order to connect with the blows. Whoosh whoosh. A 1-2 jab, classic boxing move. Devastating if it landed, but alas it was too slow. Way too slow for his eyes and body, which could keep up with the movements of high-class devils. Swish swish. Using her own speed or lack thereof to his advantage, Naruto moved within her defenses and landed 2 strokes with his blade, forming an X-like slash across her chest. It was only thanks to her rook defense, and the fact that Kiba came in the last second and pulled her back, that she didn't suffer any serious damage from his attack aside from the clothing damage which left her school uniform and the bra underneath it in burnt tatters. "He's mine," Yuto declared as he pulled Kaneko back as they momentarily retreated from the bespectacled exorcist, their bodies moving towards the broken wall that fell victim to the fireball. "Let me help, senpai. You're too slow to keep up with him. Let me take care of this." The knight swung his sword, which now turned black, signifying the activation of Holy Eraser, the demonic sword which devours holy essence, and using the sword's ability to destroy 4 blades of light that were thrown at them while they were talking. "You go check on Issei," he added with finality, his eyes never leaving the exorcist. "Hi, senpai." Kaneko replied with her normally flat voice, but it didn't take a genius to realize that she was rather reluctant to comply with Knight's wishes. Kaneko turned towards the pile of rubble beyond the hole in the wall where a bruised, banged up, and bleeding Issei sat. "Don't lose," she told her senpai before she ran to assist the newly reincarnated devil. The knight nodded at her before he held his black sword in one hand poised to attack Naruto in a moment's notice. "I've been waiting for this," he said as his body blurred with the use of his knight's speed. In response, the exorcist ran towards the devil, his body blurring from existence as well. Flashes of light and darkness accompanied by a symphony of clashing steel filled the chapel as the 2 combatants found themselves locked in a furious high-speed melee to the death. Despite the building anger and hate swelling inside Kiba for the fact that his opponent was a wielder of a true holy sword, he couldn't help but be surprised at the sheer skill and capacity which the human showed. With regards to natural capabilities, magical reserves, strength, and speed, it was common knowledge that devils surpassed humans in all of those aspects. Though for some reason, no matter what he did, the human appeared to be faster, stronger, and better than him in all aspects of combat. This fact grind his gears to no end. Swish. With a swing of his pitch-black blade, Yuto easily smashed through 2 of the exorcist's burning swords. He tried to use this to his advantage and push in his assault towards his now disarmed opponent. Swish. The knight swung his sword horizontally, aimed to slash through his opponent's chest and cleave him in 2. However, much to his surprise, his demonic sword did not meet flesh, but rather another pair of holy swords held X-wise across the bespectacled blonde's chest. Clang. The sounds of their swords meeting echoed, a small amount of sparks flying in between them. Naruto raised a brow lazily as he found himself in the midst of pushing his swords against Kiba's own. "What were you waiting for? Have you been waiting for me to get serious and kick your ass?" he asked innocently, not that Kiba brought it, because for some reason those words just pissed the devil off, as evidenced by the stronger push of the devil's blade. Get him angrier to make his swordsmanship sloppier. Just as planned. Slacking his hold of his blade, Naruto allowed the devil to overpower and destroy his swords, causing Kiba to overextend himself and lean in towards the exorcist's body. Naruto took a quick step to the side before he extended his elbow towards the devil. Predictably, the devil's spotless Bishounen face had a rather unpleasant meeting with the elbow. "Or were you waiting for me to knock out the kid with the gauntlet, almost incapacitate the girl, and being so close and beating you, so I can finally escape before your leader comes in and everything blows up in my face?" Naruto asked as 3 blades appeared between each of his knuckles in both hands. The exorcist swung both of his hands as he took a step towards Kiba in attempt to take him out while he was recovering from the elbow strike. Clang. All 6 blades met the length of the black demonic blade which Yuto brought up to defend himself. If it weren't for the speed and reflexes he got for being a knight, then he would have most likely found himself spotting 6 new wounds from those sacred swords. Naruto channeled chakra to his legs before kicking off backwards in a mad reverse dash, getting away from the devil, allowing a small distance to appear between them, just enough distance for him to throw the 6 blades. Forward blocked easily, but 2 others grazed the devil across his shoulders, lacerating the skin with the holy blades which acted like poison to the damned. Blood squirted from his shoulders, forcing the devil to cease his planned assault and fall down on one knee. "Tell me again, were you waiting for this?" A clearly frustrated and seething Yuto only gritted his teeth angrily in response. He was mad, angry at the fact that the exorcist hasn't even used the true holy sword which he despised, angry at the fact that he was getting outclassed, angry that his opponent looked so bored and impassive during their fight. It was as if he wasn't even considered a threat. Kiba stood slowly, his legs slightly shaking from exhaustion. He stood up, not caring about his wounds, his sword held tightly in both hands. He slightly crouched down, his body leaning towards the exorcist, poised for an attack before he vanished in a burst of speed. The devil was fast, that was for sure, at least as fast as a mid-class devil, just slightly below his own speed. If it were any other exorcist, they would without a doubt have a harder time dealing with the demonic sword user. Then again, he wasn't any other exorcist, he was an executioner, one of the handful humans that are allowed to hunt and kill high-ranking devils. If he wasn't so blinded by his rage of going up against an exorcist who potentially possessed a true holy sword, then as a swordsman Kiba would have immediately observed that there was something off about his opponent's stance. He would have noticed that the several fatal openings within the exorcist's guard that were just begging to get attacked were left open. Naruto was purposely opening up his guard, enticing his opponents to attack those spots so that he could predict the flows his attacks to an even better extent. It was such a reckless and downright suicidal, yet extremely effective fighting style. Alas, Kiba did not see that, and thus for several seconds he took the opportunity to focus and concentrate his attacks on the openings within his opponent's defense in hope of slaying the murderous exorcist. His enraged attacks were parried, blocked, and dodged with ease by the bespectacled youth. Each failed attack was met in kind with a fierce counterattack in the form of either a stroke of the holy sword or a punch, and sometimes even a kick, which brought about a degree of injuries all over the knight's body. That only added more fuel to the fire. Holy Eraser! Kiba cried out as his black blade produced a misty black miasma which wrapped itself with the pair of sacred swords that he was currently clashing against. A second upon contact, both of his enemy's blades were destroyed. Stop using those cheap second-hand holy swords. They're useless against my demonic swords. He glared the sword strapped behind the blonde as his attacks got even fiercer than before, forcing the exorcist to go on the defensive. Use it! Use that holy sword so I can destroy it! He shouted as he charged at the now silent Naruto. Two blades once again replaced the previously destroyed ones. Have we met before? Naruto asked as he blocked the attack easily, his eyes and mind already working on a way to swiftly counterattack. The unexpected question that came from his fellow blonde seemed to momentarily pull Kiba from his rage-induced stupor. No, he replied as he kept clashing blades with his fellow blonde. Why do you look familiar? The bespectacled executor muttered as he met Kiba's slashes blow per blow, not minding the fact that his sword was destroying each of his own. After all, he had thousands of those blades for use. Losing a couple hundred or so of them wouldn't hurt. Despite being in the midst of combat with Kiba, Naruto's mind was working in overdrive as he tried to recall any information related to a person who can create demonic swords. The first idea that came to his mind was his old friend and rival Siegfried, but he then recalled that the guy had twice critical for a sacred gear, and not one that gave birth to demonic swords gave birth to swords. A sacred gear that creates demonic swords, the sacred gear's sword birth. Naruto's brows lazily rose as he came to a realization. You're that one kid from that Holy Sword project, the one that got away from the massacre. Kiba's eyes narrowed at the exorcist as his glare increased in intensity. How do you know that? He asked as he took several steps away from the confrontation, allowing the exorcist a chance to speak, and himself a small amount of time to recover. Well, I'm rather well informed about the happenings in the church. After all, information is power, another weapon we can use in battle. He tapped his head in order to ascertain his words. That, and I knew of the Holy Sword project. After all, it was aimed to create artificial holy sword users based on Valper Galilei's dream of wielding the Excalibur, but to accomplish his dream, he needed something, a blueprint if you say so. Yudo Kiba was by no means stupid. With just the subtle words tossed around by the exorcist, he started trying to connect the dots in his mind until it led him to one obvious conclusion, a conclusion that caused his eyes to widen as he at first stared into nothingness, as if looking at the very abyss itself before eventually looking at his adversary in shock. Oh? So you finally get it, huh? Naruto said as if realizing that the devil finally connected the dots. Yes, Devil-san, the blueprint for artificial holy sword users were based on me, a true holy sword wielder. They tried to create holy sword users based on me and my bond with my sword. You can say that I'm what they were trying to achieve, copy, and emulate Devil-san. To Kiba, the exorcist's mouth moved in slow motion as the best words were said. I was part of the reason for the creation of that project. Yudo Kiba felt something snap within him, a snap followed by the sound of something shattering in his mind as he processed the news. Not even a second later, all Yudo Kiba saw was red, blood red, rage-filled red, murderous red. He wanted nothing more than to see the origin of all the pain and misery that he and his friends suffered for be turned into fine red paste upon the cold and hard granite floor. He wanted to kill the exorcist. A hate-filled malicious growl emanated from the demonic user, one which actually made his fellow devils flinch Kaneko and shiver in fear Issei upon hearing the howl from beyond the hole in the wall. An unreal amount of rage and malice that one would have never expected to come from the normally nice knight exuded from his body in waves. "You're dead!" The night malice-filled scream echoed not only in the underground chapel but throughout the church. Without a care in the world he held his demonic sword with both hands, holding it by the side as he ran towards the exorcist, ready to unleash his wrath upon the cause of his traumatic past. He brought his sword up and then swung it down with all the force he could muster. Chance of victory 95%. Naruto declared as he conjured his own 2 lightsabers from his sleeves and swung them both towards Kiba, his blades meeting that of the demonic sword in a loud metallic clang. The moment you let your emotions get the better of you is also the moment of your defeat. The 2 holy blades blocking the holy eraser was easily destroyed. There was no contest to that as the rage-empowered anti-holy weapons sliced through them like they were butter. However, just as those swords were broken, Naruto released his hold upon them. He then slightly spun around while staying on the spot, his right hand extended to his side as he started going through the step necessary in order to reproduce the rite of passage technique passed down to every chakra adept Uzumaki. The very same technique that he learned through some scrolls after his banishment. Rotate. Strengthen. Stabilize. Those 3 steps flashed through his mind as a blue spiraling sphere of power formed within the palm of his extended hand. Without any hesitations, the exorcist completed his spin and thrusted the orb towards the incoming black blade. Rasengan, spiraling sphere. The holy eraser snapped after a few seconds of contact against the sphere, and while the blade was destroyed, the orb itself was still full of life and kept spinning furiously as it landed on the devil's chest. Yudo was launched to a nearby wall, opposite to that of the previously destroyed one by the blonde's flames. With a resounding crash, the wall behind the devil cracked. A small crater formed behind him as the devil coughed out blood. Before the knight could even recover and push himself away from the wall, or even assess the extent of his injuries, several sacred swords pinned him to the wall limb for limb. What was once a rage-filled cry turned to one of pain, almost frighteningly similar to a gasped death before the knight fell unconscious from the pain of the strange sphere which destroyed his sword and almost caused his chest to cave in, as well as the swords sticking out of his body. Rage can only bring you so far. Naruto shook his head, rather disappointed in the outcome of the fight. He made sure none of his blows were lethal, but he was sure that those blows still hurt like hell. "That's why I don't need to use Kusanagi against you. Using it would just be plain overkill, and I wouldn't want that. Not when your king is most likely connected to either the Lucifer or the Leviathan of the underworld. Don't want to start an international incident that may break the ceasefire and all." The exorcist turned his head towards the hole in the wall, his blue eyes welcoming the sight of the petite devil and the banged-up brown-haired devil passing through it. "So would you two allow me to leave, or would you like to suffer the same fate as the sword user?" "Kiba!" Issei bellowed out as he placed a hand upon the broken wall to prevent himself from collapsing down on the ground due to his injuries. The brown-haired devil grunted in pain, his eyes glaring at the exorcist as he tried to push himself off the wall, the fire in his eyes still burning brightly, still ready for another battle. Play Black Rock Shooter OST, Battle of BRS. An extended arm prevented Issei from proceeding. "Stand back," said Kaneko in her monotone voice as she sent Issei a look which was easily translated by the male devil that she will handle the battle. He wanted to retort in any way, but that look of hers told shut him up. Kaneko walked towards the exorcist, her gloved hands both balled into fists as she adopted a southpaw boxing stance with her feet wide apart, both of her arms up, left one slightly extend towards Naruto, right hand close to her body. "I see." Naruto sighed in an exasperated manner as he placed his left hand on the bridge of his glasses and pushed it up in order to put it back in a more comfortable place as it slightly shifted down during his skirmish with his fellow blonde. "For the last time, are you sure about this?" With all the strength she could muster, the petite devil kicked off the ground, the footing beneath her shattered as she moved forward and threw a left jab which smashed through the air due to the fact that the bespectacled blonde easily avoided by swaying his body away from the fist's path. "Hi," she said in simple flat monotone as she followed up, throwing several more jabs, doing her best to observe her opponent's movements and stance. What she found was similar to the one Kiba saw. His defense was riddled with holes. Ridiculously large ones that were just begging to be exploited. Being of calm mind, Kaneko observed with more scrutiny than Kiba. Are the openings a trap? Was her purposely baiting her? Such were the thoughts that flew by her mind. Deciding to take a risk, she looked for one of the smaller and less noticeable opening in the exorcist's guard. With a quick right jab, she found that she almost hit her opponent. Almost being the key word, as he managed to react and get away when her fists were mere inches away from smashing against his frame. He was fast, slightly faster than Kiba even, that much Kaneko could admit, as each jab that she sent through his defenses was easily dodged and avoided, sometimes even the last second, as if to purposely mock her inability to land a decent hit. Internally clicking her tongue, Kaneko shifted gears and began throwing kicks into the mix in an attempt to confuse the exorcist. It didn't sell. He just weaved himself around each kick and punch, but this time he threw his own ones, swift and strong jabs aimed for her vital areas such as her chest, neck, and heart. None of which were really effective, as her natural defense as a rook allowed her to endure those blows with ease. "We seem to have a stalemate here," said Naruto as he carefully avoided a kick aimed for his right leg as well as a hook aimed for his face. "Why are we fighting again?" he asked in a bored tone that equaled that of Kaneko in an attempt to rile the emotionless girl up, much like he did with the blonde swordsman. "You hurt them," Kaneko said as she finally concocted a plan which was crazy enough to work. She lifted her left leg and then with most of her strength stomped it down, causing the granite flooring beneath to explode into chunks of earth that were sent flying all over the place. "So I'll hurt you back." Kaneko took a quick step forward, carefully swaying her body around the airborne rubble, successfully getting inside the currently distracted blonde's guard, allowing her to throw right-handed uppercut, which almost nailed the blonde in the chin if he didn't take a step back. The sheer force of the blow, however, managed to cause the exorcist to slide back a few feet away from her, placing him near the middle of the underground chapel. That was close. Naruto let out a small whistle as he dusted the small debris on his dirted vestments. "I guess there is no avoiding it then." A set of 3 blades appeared in between the knuckles of his hands. "I've already seen the future." He looked at the devil, his cold blue eyes meeting her emotionless golden orbs. "You will lose in 5 moves," he declared with utmost confidence. "Like hell, Kaneko-chan will lose." "Kick his ass!" shouted Issei from the side. His voice, however, was easily drowned out and ignored by both Kaneko and Naruto. The former didn't really care what he had to say and was only aware of his presence in case he decided to join in the fight. The latter was too busy thinking of her next course of action while trying her best to not get affected by her adversary's proclamation of victory. It wasn't really that well known, but Kaneko was one of the more observant members of her peerage, and it was through her proficiency in this ability that she observed the beads of sweat forming on the exorcist's forehead. The answer to her problems came at her faster than one can say. Issei is a pervert. Stamina. It was as simple as that. No matter how strong or fast or magically adept her opponent is, he is still human. In general, humans tend to get tired faster than a devil at one or another, seeing as their bodies still have their limitations, unlike devils, angels, fallen angels, or yokai who lack said limitation. That meant all she needed to do was outlast him in combat. Seeing as she is a rook, the part of the peerage which boasts the most physical capabilities and endurance, she was sure that this plan of her would work. Internally giving herself a pat on the back, Kaneko rushed towards her opponent, intent on dragging this match as long as possible to tire him out. She started with a combination of kicks and punches, aiming both high and low, careful not to get into close proximity of the holy blades. Naruto carefully watched every punch and kick, observing the flow of the attacks before allowing his honed reflexes to take over and dodge each blows. "I already know that you're both strong," the descendant of the sage said as he avoided a particularly strong haymaker whose wind was strong enough to blow him away if he didn't use chakra to stick himself in place. He tossed the 6 towards Kaneko, silently observing as he watched her duck, sway, and even roll to her side to evade the sacred swords. That was 1 move. Another set of 6 blades appeared in his hands. Half of this set he threw directly at the devil, while the other 3 he threw with more force, causing them to miss the girl completely, and instead land somewhere behind the girl. That was 2 moves. She tried to take a quick step towards him, intent on continuing her storm of fists and kicks, but Kaneko was forced to abandon any of her thoughts as the exorcist opened his mouth and released a familiar blue ball of flames. The rook brought her hands up, crossing them against her body as she met the full brunt of the attack, which pushed her back, her feet skidding violently on the ground. It took her a while, but with her durability she was able to tank the spell, leaving her mostly undamaged except for the fact that she was left almost naked and that her normally pale skin was covered in soot. That was 3 moves. And durable. Naruto nodded to himself as he watched her breath heavily while she stood in the midst of several of his holy swords that he threw earlier. "This is slightly troublesome since you can probably take anything I can normally dish out. I guess this leaves me with no choice." His hand reached for the true holy sword strapped behind him, causing the impassive girl's eyes to slightly widen before they narrowed at him, while her body tensed to new heights. Psyche. He didn't reach for the sword, instead his hand moved quickly from his side to his front, meeting his other hand in a resounding clap until they moved his left thumb on top, hands together vertically forming what many would call a ram's seal. Kekai no Jutsu, Kyukin Kekai, barrier technique, 9 sword barrier. When those words left his mouth, 3 swords surrounding Kaneko glowed eerily, a wall of blue projected from each blade forming a triangle-shaped barrier trapping the devil within. Outside the barrier 3 other swords started shining brightly until yet other triangle blue barrier was formed, this one pointed in the opposite direction of the first one. The last 3 swords of the 9 were sticking outside of the second barrier. Like in the other 2 times, the swords glowed brightly before another barrier was formed, this one taking the opposite position as the last one, resulting in the creation of 3-layered triangular barrier. That was 4 moves. Kaneko predictably punched the walls of the first barrier, as any person, human, devil or whatnot who finds themselves suddenly trapped would do. In hindsight, she was lucky that Naruto didn't use the barrier which burned her with holy flames. This allowed her to actually punch, tackled, and kick the first barrier. Much to her hidden joy, Kaneko found her attacks actually slightly cracking her new prison. Unfortunately for her, the exorcist's next words sealed her fate. His hands moved from a ram seal to a tiger hand seal. Shinka, Sansosho, Sacred Flame, Hypoxia. Out of nowhere, a large pillar of flame shot out from between each barrier, flooding the entire sealed area with a sea of blue flames. The slight cracks in the innermost barrier proved to be her downfall, as the small cracks allowed a small amount of flames to get in and devour what little oxygen was present within her prison. In a matter of seconds, the levels of oxygen within the first barrier dropped to a near zero, causing Kaneko to not only stop her assault but also place her hands around her neck as she desperately gasped for air. Yet none came, and she soon found herself falling towards the ground, her mind already moving towards the realm of the unconscious. 5 moves, checkmate. When he was the devil fall to the ground, the exorcist immediately released the seal, allowing both the barrier and the flames restraining the knocked out devil to fall, giving her body enough leeway to unconsciously get in more oxygen into her system. It was a close brush and with death, but at least she didn't die. She was a devil after all. A few seconds without oxygen wouldn't really do much damage to her. Kaneko! The young boosted gear user glared at the exorcist before the teen decided to charge at the blonde killer once more, despite the fact that his body and reserves were pretty much non-existent at that point. With his fist extended forward, he attempted to connect a sucker punch at the blonde's neck, only for the exorcist to respond by easily step to the side, trip him, grabbed his off-balanced self, and then tossing him away towards the altar near the body of fallen Asia. Naruto sighed in frustration and a bit of exhaustion. If he knew what Kaneko's thoughts were, then he would have praised her for not being that far away from the truth. He was getting tired, he needed to finish this soon. Are you really going to attack me? Issei pushed himself off the ground, his body hurt, his stamina non-existent, yet he refused to give up. He rushed towards the exorcist, who by then was just staring at him lazily as he let his fists fly out. Why? He asked as the exorcist danced around his attacks. Huh? Why did you kill her? She was so nice. So innocent. She only wanted to have friends and live a quiet and normal happy life. Why did you have to kill her? Why? Each punch he threw got fiercer and fiercer, as if to emphasize the strong emotion of distaste he felt towards the exorcist's actions. Because it was my mission, Naruto replied, his voice maintaining its emotional cover. The happiness of many comes before the happiness of the few. With her death, the church's followers who demanded for her death would finally achieve happiness. Would you really be so selfish as to not grant them their happiness for the sake of one life? His right hand moved, blocking a punch from the crimson-colored gauntlet, which managed to slightly push him back. For the sake of the life of a traitor who healed the enemy of the church, who healed the devil. Mission? You killed her over something as stupid as that? There was a moment hesitation on Naruto's part before he responded. Yes, I killed her for the sake of my mission, he confirmed, as he released his hold on the devil's fist. He took a few steps back, his body swaying from side to side to evade a new array of punches coming from the brown-haired boy. Issei Hayadu stopped attacking and took a few steps away from the exorcist, his body beaten, bruised, and pushed to the point of exhaustion as his brown bangs shadowed his eyes. The teen couldn't forgive himself, he couldn't protect Asia, he didn't come fast enough, he was too late. Give her back, he muttered, his desire for power slowly rising. Naruto watched on as Issei got up yet again, despite falling for God knows how many times that day already. However, before he could fully get up, the devil's legs failed on him, causing him to fall back on the ground. The devil had no combat experience, he was fighting like an amateur, yet behind the cruel embrace of inexperience the exorcist could see a fiery will that refused to back down and surrender. A fiery will that quite honestly scared Naruto for a moment. He couldn't explain why, but deep within him he could feel something telling him to extinguish this flame before it got bigger. Extinguish it before it became a great inferno that will burn the world. Damn it! Issei looked at the ground as he smashed his balled-up fists against it. White tears were forming in his eyes. Why do I have to be so weak, Asia, Kaneko, Kiba? You all got hurt because I was too weak. Why couldn't I protect you all? You're all hurt because of me. He kept smashing his fists against the concrete floor, not knowing that the devil was looking down on him with a rather sad and understanding expression on his face, as if the exorcist knew how the boy felt at that very moment. Damn it, Issei cursed out once more, only this time the green gem within his sacred gear started glowing. What? It is said that desire is what powers a sacred gear, and it was his desire. He wanted strength to hurt the exorcist in front of him. He wanted strength to hurt him for hurting Kiba and Kaneko. He wanted strength to hurt him for killing Asia. He already failed in protecting everyone. So now nothing else mattered. He just wanted to hurt the exorcist. Dragon Booster. The mechanical sound came from his gauntlet as it changed its form, morphing into an even fiercer-looking dragon-like version of the sacred gear which covered majority of the boy's arm. Boost. Naruto heard the faint whispering coming from the devil, causing him to snap out of his thoughts and raise a brow at the sacred gear user. Dragon Booster? His eyebrow furrowed for a moment as his mind moved in haste, carefully thinking of where he had had that command. After several seconds his eyes widened in realization. One of the 13 Longinus? The Red Dragon Emperor's Gauntlet, boosted gear. Boost. Issei Hayate slowly stood up, his previous injuries now meant nothing. He could feel a newfound power flooding his body. It felt good. With this, he could finally fight against the Exorcist. With this he can finally kick that guy's ass. Boost. Promotion Queen, he said before he kicked off the ground and made a mad dash towards the exorcist. He could hear a faint whispering from his gauntlet telling him of a command that he must use, one command that can turn the table of this battle and allow him to land a devastating blow to the exorcist. Explosion. Upon uttering that command, the built-up boosts and power stored within the sacred gear was released directly into his system, allowing Issei to wield a power that surpassed his normal limits, power that equaled that of his king. Give Asia Baokayak. Naruto's eyes were still wide as he observed the increase in power before they slowly narrowed at the devil. The power he was exuding exceeded that of a low-class devil, not even a middle-class devil. No, the devil was producing power levels which were comparable to that of a high-class devil. In a burst of speed matching that of the incapacitated knight, the pawn vanished for a moment only to reappear a few feet away from the blonde, his sacred gear-clad arm already cocked back. Blow away, you shitty priest! Like pulling the trigger of a gun, the devil's hand shot forward, smashing through the air in a loud whoosh as it approached the blonde exorcist, ready to unleash an unholy amount of deadly pain and violence upon the person. Though in the end, it was but a simple punch, a straight that held no skill and finesse like petite devil's punches, or speed like demonic sword users' slashes, it was just pure power. To the eyes of Naruto Uzumaki it looked as if Issei was moving in slow motion. His choice of attack was nothing short of predictable, as if it was telegraphed a mile away. He could slash the boy's arm off, but he'd not want that, cause Asia will be sad if he killed her friend, so he won't kill the devil. Hurt, yep, definitely done that already, but no killing. Enough of this. Naruto muttered under his breath as he took one step towards the incoming fist before he avoided it by spinning towards Issei's body, completely avoiding the empowered punch. The exorcist produced a single holy sword in his right hand. Using the momentum of his spin to his advantage, the bespectacled blonde landed a clean yet shallow diagonal slash upon the devil's body.